We're at the CBS News decision desk, and early indications are this is shaping up as a tight race for president. We could be in for a long night. Polls have closed in 6 states, including 2 of the battlegrounds that will decide the presidency.
They are Virginia and Georgia, and it is too soon to project a winner in either state. But in Virginia, Hillary Clinton has an edge over Donald Trump based on the exit polls.
Sample precincts from the early count is how we're determining that on the exit polls. Trump has the edge in Georgia. The peach state has been low-hanging fruit for Republicans in every election since 1996.
Both candidates are on the board with wins. We project Clinton will get Vermont's 3 electoral votes.
Trump rakes in 8 in the bluegrass state of Kentucky.
And he gets 11 more in his running mate's home state of Indiana.
We're just getting started. It's election night on CBS.
We want to defend our most cherished values.
This is a movement like no one has ever seen before.
I want this election to be about something, not just against somebody.
We will make America great again.
Let's make history together.
Get out and vote, 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 vote.
America's best days are still ahead of us.
We are going to drain the swamp of corruption.
Let's go out and prove love trumps hate.
Good evening. I'm Scott Pelley with Nora O'Donnell at CBS News Election Headquarters in New York. With us tonight are John Dickerson and Charlie Rose, Gayle King and Bob Schieffer, and Elaine Quijano. The nastiest presidential campaign in our lifetimes has finally come to an end. More than 4 out of 5 voters told us they were disgusted by it.
That's right, and tonight voters are deciding whether the 45th president of the United States will be the first woman to hold the office. That is 69-year-old Democrat Hillary Clinton, the former Secretary of State, New York Senator and First Lady, or 70-year-old Donald Trump, the New York businessman and former reality TV star making his first run for office. I think everybody knows who the candidates are. They have both had historically high disapproval ratings above 50%.
Voters are also deciding which party will control Congress. Will the Republicans hold on to both the House and the Senate? The Democrats need a net gain of only 5 seats to take the Senate back, or just 4 seats if Clinton wins the presidency and Vice President Tim Kaine becomes the 50-50 tiebreaker.
In the presidential election, it's all about the electoral votes. Each state gets as many of those as it has senators and representatives in Congress. D.C. gets 3 votes for a total of 538. And to win the presidency, you need a majority. That's 270 electoral votes. So let's look at where we are. Trump has 19 electoral votes. Clinton has 3.
John Dickerson, as we're getting into this evening, what are you looking for? What are we seeing in the early exit poll information?
Well, what I'm looking for, Scott, is one of 3 scenarios. Is this going to look like a campaign if you just had a generic Republican and a generic Democrat following the patterns of American politics? That seems crazy after this campaign where we had 2 candidates who were so particular. Then the other thing is they say it's all about turnout on Election Day. So 2 other scenarios is one where Donald Trump brings out that silent majority. And the other scenario is where Hillary Clinton brings out, say, the sleeping giant, which is what they called the Latino vote, if she brings out her voters. So those are the 2 other scenarios other than the one that just kind of goes down the middle.
There is so much anxiety in this election. Everyone keeps saying who is going to win tonight, what's going to happen. And while the polls have not closed in many states, they have closed in some states. And as we just noted, Virginia is edge Clinton. Explain, John, what that means based on what we know now.
If it's edge, we're giving the advantage to a candidate, but it means that advantage could be reversed if the numbers statistically don't work out. So there's a little padding. If it's a lean, it's beyond that, which means they have a little bit more of a lead. And then if you get even beyond lean, well, then that's where you get into the territory where we might make a projection.
And we should let the folks at home know that those projections are based on the exit poll information that we've collected at voting precincts all across the country. Voters voters have been telling us how they voted and why they voted that way. We've been compiling that information, and then the folks at the decision desk there behind us take all of that information and then the actual votes that are being counted, and that allows us to make these projections on which way states are leaning, or whenever one of the candidates we project has won one of those states. And no matter what we're doing, no matter what we're talking about, the very second that we project a winner in a state, we will interrupt what we're doing, and you will be the first to know.
When you talk about the anxiety, Nora, I think that that's such an interesting thing. John, you said it best earlier. You said it's like being at the doctor's office waiting for the results. Charlie and I were talking about later being in the delivery room waiting to hear if it's
a boy or girl.
It's a boy or a girl. And when I went to my polling place today, people may be disgusted, as we were talking about, but they showed up to vote. The people at my precinct told me that they ran out of the I voted today stickers, that they had the biggest turnout today than they've had in the past 4 elections. So people may be disgusted. They may be tired, they may be anxious. I met a Trump voter and a Clinton voter. One said I need Tums, another said I need a glass of wine. I just want it to be done. Whatever, but they are turning out to vote. They want to speak up.
You know, Scott, it can change during the night because all of the regions that we know, like my North Carolina and New York, the East is different than the center, the Piedmont, urban versus rural. All of that reports at different times. And as we learn more about what region supports which candidate, it affects the state results.
Elaine Quijano, one of the largest voting blocs tonight will be millennials, and that'll be a big change for America.
That's right. 31% of eligible voters are millennials, which is equal to the number of baby boomers. But of course, eligible voters and actual voters are 2 different things. So we're going to be watching to see what it is that they do, particularly when it comes to third-party candidates. Going into this night, millennials, many of them said that they would be about 10%, about 13% said that they would be going for a third-party candidate, either Gary Johnson or Jill Stein. Of course, when they have tight races like this, John Dickerson, you know well, that can make all the difference.
Yeah. Bob, let's talk about what we know right now. Yeah. We're talking about, in particular, Virginia and Georgia. And if at this hour, with the polls closed in Virginia, the Clinton campaign would be very, very nervous if they weren't doing well in Virginia, right? But they currently have the edge.
I think we all kind of, the handicappers from the beginning, have thought this was going to go to Hillary Clinton. I think it's important, though, that if she's going to win, she needs to get Virginia. I think it'll be extremely difficult for Donald Trump to get to the presidency without Virginia. He's going to have to win someplace where we didn't think he was going to win. I think the important thing right now is there's no surprises. Things seem to be going about the way we thought they were going to go.
All right, Bob, stand by. We want to go to Major Garrett, who has been covering the Trump campaign and is at the Trump victory party, they're calling it tonight. Major, good evening.
Good evening, Scott and Nora. The mindset of the Trump campaign visible on Donald Trump's own Twitter feed. The fascinating thing about covering this campaign is, yes, you can talk to senior advisors, but Trump often speaks the truth right out loud on Twitter. And he identified moments ago the importance of the state of Florida. There is deep and abiding anxiety within Trump Tower about what they're seeing in Florida, because they know and have said over and over, there is no Trump path to the presidency without Florida's 29 electoral votes. And they are deeply concerned about the Latino turnout for Hillary Clinton, plus a softening of suburban college-educated women for Donald Trump. And in that reason, Trump has urged Florida supporters to get to the polls. And it's a 2-tiered system in Florida. 67 counties, 10 of them on the central time zone, and some of those counties don't close until 9 p.m. Eastern. So that strategic urging from Trump has real value in those counties, because Mitt Romney in 2012 cleared more than 190,000 votes over Barack Obama. Trump needs to find every vote he can in Florida, hence the urging of supporters to get there before the polls close. Scott and Nora.
Major Garrett for us tonight. Major, thank you very much. Let's go over to Nancy Cordes, who is at the Jacob Javits Center here in New York City on the west side, where the Hillary Clinton campaign intends to have its party tonight. Nancy?
And Scott, they're not popping the champagne corks just yet, but they probably are thinking about how good it might taste. And that's because all of the data that they're seeing, and this is a data-driven campaign, matches up with what they expected. Good news for the Clinton campaign because they have so many paths to those 270 electoral votes. They are especially heartened by that turnout in key Democratic counties in Florida that Major was just talking about. They can win without winning Florida, but Donald Trump cannot. Anecdotally, anecdotally, what they're hearing from their army of volunteers across the country is that there is a lot of enthusiasm out there, and that tracks with what we've been seeing in our polling in the closing days as Clinton took the edge in enthusiasm among supporters from Donald Trump, who had that edge all throughout this campaign. Other things that are encouraging to the Clinton campaign tonight, they're not seeing that secret Trump voter that the Trump campaign had been insisting was out there, that wasn't talking to pollsters but was going to mobilize on Election Day. They're not seeing a huge drop-off in the African-American vote from 2012. There is a drop-off, but it's not as large as some had feared. And they are seeing that big spike in Latino voting, which Clinton's running mate Tim Kaine today described as a powerful new voting bloc in America that is finding its voice in this election, Scott.
Nancy Cordes at the Clinton campaign party tonight. Nancy, thank you.
Yeah, and this is the first time we've had, since 1944, that we've had two major party candidates from the state of New York. Do you remember who it was? FDR and Dewey. So it's amazing to have these two candidates just blocks away from each other.
You're less than 2 miles, Nora, so people could run back and forth if they wanted to.
Assuming anybody would want to.
Yes.
Assuming they speak.
Yeah. Assuming that they speak. Yeah.
Assuming that
maybe the concession they can get together at the end of the night.
That's right, getting together. And you can see together at the bottom of our screen is the electoral vote tally. You can see there Clinton has 3 electoral votes, Trump 19 votes, of course, very early in the evening. But we want to keep that for you there on the screen so everybody knows at the moment's notice how this race is going. We want to bring in Kellyanne Conway, who is Trump's campaign manager, joins us now from Trump Tower. Kellyanne, you have been out on the campaign trail. You're getting in reports now. What can you tell us about the state of this race?
I can tell you that it's still a jump ball in many places, Nora, and we're really happy. I mean, for a campaign that has a fraction of the personnel, a fraction of the money as they do at Team Clinton, we're proud of our efforts on the ground, focusing some of our late in the game resources in some of these places. So we see North Carolina and Florida as a jump ball right now. We're feeling really good about Iowa and Ohio, and then we're looking at flipping a blue state like Michigan or perhaps Pennsylvania, like the late-breaking polls in New Hampshire and Colorado as well. So we see a couple different routes. We see about 6 or 7 different routes to 270, and we're just going to be patient as these returns come in. We know people are still standing in line to vote, and I don't want to talk too much about exit polls that may dampen them one way or the other.
Now, your campaign filed suit in Nevada earlier today over the election. What can you tell us about that?
I understand the judge is not entertaining that suit at the moment. We had received information that perhaps the polls were kept open later to allow folks to vote. And so if it's active litigation, I shouldn't comment on it further. But what I read is I've read that the judge is not entertaining that lawsuit at the moment.
What's wrong with allowing the voters a chance to vote?
Well, we're all for allowing voters to vote. We're all for rule of law. That's really what our campaign is about. We're not the ones under active FBI investigations or being said by the FBI director we've been reckless and careless about handling classified information. So, of course, we're for the rule of law. We believe people who want to vote ought to be able to do that if they're in line on time and if all other procedures have been met.
Kellyanne, you described Florida as a jump ball, but that's also a must-win state for you. I've spoken with the Clinton campaign, as I've spoken with your campaign throughout the day. The Clinton campaign says that they believe they have banked such a big early vote with new Hispanic voters who've never voted before that even if Donald Trump had huge numbers at the polls, there's no way he could win that state. How do you reply?
I think that's a little bit of spin and sophistry. If that were true, then you'll see Florida called early. What we see is a very strong day of vote in Florida today, particularly in counties where we've improved the margins over Governor Romney's margins in 2012. We have people deployed in these counties who are talking to us about the returns, and we're getting data inputs into our war room on a constant basis, Nora. And we like the fact that Mr. Trump seems to have grown the turnout and grown the voter share within some of these key counties across Florida. The other thing I would say is that we already know Republicans are behind in early votes. That's why we count on a big day of vote in places like Florida and Nevada and North Carolina. And then when you look at states that don't have a tradition of early voting like Michigan, Pennsylvania, and New Hampshire, that's part of why we went back to those states late in the game, because most of those voters, except for those who vote absentee, will cast their ballots today on Election Day.
All right, Kellyanne Conway, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
John Dickerson, I know you're both reporting and looking at all of the numbers, but analyze what Kellyanne has told us and what we know about the state of the race right now.
Well, she's talking about multiple paths, but there really aren't multiple paths. I mean, really, because Hillary Clinton starts with a lead, because of the way states traditionally vote, historically, more Democratic states in Hillary Clinton's column. And so what Kellyanne Conway is saying is there are a bunch of different states, but she still has to win Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, and then a couple of other big ones. At this hour, what they need to be saying is we're going to flip Michigan. We're going to take one away from Democrats who haven't lost that state since 1988, or take one away in Pennsylvania, 1988, another state that Democrats have won since then. And it's still, the description she's giving of the different pathways is still quite diffuse at this late hour.
Do they really have 6 different paths, as she says?
Well, you can, 6 different paths if one of the paths assumes winning every single battleground state. So the key question is, what are the realistic paths that they have? And we've known, because of the historical voting patterns, the way these states vote, Donald Trump starts a little bit further behind if tradition holds in the way these states vote.
And Charlie Rose is standing by right now with our political panel for some insight into all of this. Charlie?
Thank you, Scott. We do indeed have a political panel. Next to me is Wall Street Journal's Peggy Noonan, also Slate's Jamel Bowie, and the New York Times' Mark Leibovich. Let me begin with this idea of a close race. Surprising. It could change during the evening as we learn more, and we have more polls that have been counted.
Right.
But surprisingly close.
Well, close, tight. You're wondering if it's close and we have no idea what's going to happen, or close and trends that existed a week ago in which Mrs. Clinton was doing well will continue. To me, we're just starting out this evening. I'm looking at who shows up at the polls. It looks anecdotally like a lot of people did. We will see. We won't know till the evening. Bottom line, does the Obama coalition hold for Mrs. Clinton and really come out? Does Mr. Trump's promise of a broad working class sort of coalition with a lot of Democrats in it turn out to be true? What is the mix of Hispanics, white educated, white not so educated folk turn out to be? From there, we will know a lot, and it'll take a while to figure it out.
I mean, right now it's looking like it did with the polls.
Exactly. That's what it looks like.
The results we seem to be getting at this point, very early still, suggest an electorate that looks a lot like it did in 2012, maybe larger, and it suggests that we're not going to see some huge deviation from the last suite of national polls or state level polls. There still might be some surprises, precisely because things are close, things are tight, but we shouldn't, I think, at this stage expect some sort of wild variation. If you've been obsessively clicking on polling forecasters, you probably have a pretty good sense of what this race looks like.
Yeah, I don't think it's a surprise at all that we have a close race. I think people are obviously going to be very cautious at this hour of the evening. You have to be very definitive, like, say Vermont or Kentucky in either direction in order to make a real call. Right. I do think that, as Jamel said, I think that the numbers that we've seen leading up seem to be predictive. I also think that, maybe the most important numbers of all, which are Hispanic voters in Florida, seems to be the operative, number. And I think if that holds through the evening, that'll be interesting.
And the question is whether the turnout is driven by voting against something or voting for something.
Yeah, you have to wonder if it's hate voting or hope voting.
But either way, I mean, a vote's a vote, right? So if a bunch of people turn out because they hate Donald Trump, they're still turning out, they're still casting ballots. And as far as Latino voters go, if they are turning out in the rates that anecdotes suggest in Florida, then that's great. That's a great sign for Secretary Clinton.
One state you looking at, Mark?
Well, North Carolina, and not just because you're from there. No, I mean, it's been close. It's closer than a lot of the people thought. Hillary Clinton seems like she has a very good chance to win there. African-American vote seems a little down, but we'll see.
We'll be with you all evening. Back to you, Nora.
All right, very interesting indeed. And coming up, 2 more battleground states close at the bottom of the hour, Ohio and North Carolina, 2 states that Trump's own campaign says they must win. CBS News of the 2016 election continues in a moment.
Back Now with election night on CBS, and we will bring you any developments the moment that they happen. In the meantime, we've been talking to voters all across the country as they left the polls today. We've been compiling that exit poll information, and Anthony Mason is sorting through that. Anthony?
Scott, throughout this campaign, the two major party candidates have had the highest unfavorable ratings we've seen since we started polling back in 1984, and you'll see that again in our exit poll today. 54% with an unfavorable view of Hillary Clinton, 61% unfavorable towards Donald Trump, and that has affected the way people voted. 20% of Hillary Clinton's voters saying their vote for her was essentially a vote against him. 28% of Trump voters saying they voted for him to vote against her. By comparison, 4 years ago, only about 10% of voters said their vote was against the other candidate. The scandals also significant impact today. 62% said they were bothered by the Clinton email scandal, 71% bothered by Donald Trump's treatment of women. So negativity weighing heavily on voters' minds in our exit poll. Gail?
Anthony Mason, thank you very much. Bob, this will be the first time in American history that we elect a president who has an unfavorable rating above 50%. It's never happened before.
And that's why I think people are so anxious about all of this. I mean, it's not just that we're choosing a president tonight, but I think a lot of people, what's on their mind is whoever we elect, what happens after that? Will that person, some person who is unpopular, who is considered untrustworthy by many, will that person be able to bring people together and get this country going again? And, you know, it's hard to figure out how that's going to happen.
But not only are they anxious, the latest exit poll also shows this. It's 72% of Clinton voters say they're scared of a Trump presidency. 59% of Trump voters say they're scared of a Clinton presidency. How do you get past that when people have such high negatives?
Exactly. Right. Say, which candidate are you less scared of?
Well, I mean, Nora was saying, this is the high anxiety election today.
And the demands on the new leadership will be incredible because of that.
And, you know, part of this started before we had these two candidates. Is the way our politics work now, the way you raise money, the way you get people to turn out to vote is to stoke these angers. They found in the Pew has done a poll, and they looked at people and found that people who are involved in politics are much more likely now to think of their opponent as the enemy, not just a nice person who has the bad ideas, but is in fact the enemy. That was before this race.
Yeah.
All right, thanks to all of you. We're going to have much more ahead. We'll be right back. It's election night on CBS.
Wednesday.
This election is about what we stand for.
We are about change. She is about keeping it the way it is.
Polls are now closed in 4 of the 13 battleground states that will decide the presidency tonight. We have no decision yet on any of them. In the very early going, Trump has 24 electoral votes, Clinton 3, both still a very long way from the magic number of 270.
Now it is 7:30, so polls have just closed in Ohio and North Carolina, of course, 2 big battleground states. CBS News estimates that Clinton has the edge in the Tar Heel State. That's North Carolina.
Yeah.
And in Ohio, we rate that contest a toss-up right now. That is a state that Trump feels good about. And West Virginia, Trump picks up another win. He's adding West Virginia's 5 electoral votes to his total. Also want to update you, Virginia, remember, closed at the top of the 7 o'clock hour. We're giving the edge at this hour to Hillary Clinton. And in Georgia, a slight edge to Donald Trump. John?
So if you look at Virginia and North Carolina, remember that the Clinton math, as they see it, is if those traditionally Democratic states vote for Hillary Clinton, and that would include Pennsylvania and Michigan. So, you know, we want to make sure that people know those states are still up for grabs. But if Pennsylvania and Michigan go as they have for Democrats before, and she wins Virginia and North Carolina, it's looking increasingly likely that she's on her way to that magical 270
number. And do we assume that she got a lot of support from Barack Obama with the African-American vote?
Yes, undoubtedly, but we'll have to see what the shape of the vote is in North Carolina. The two things to watch for are, of course, the African-American vote, 22% of the electorate there, but also then those suburban women, white women that she has been able to do better with than Barack Obama did with in 2012.
But isn't there a big millennial population there
Listen
in North
to what
Carolina?
she's doing with the black vote right now in North Carolina. She's winning it 89-7.
Yes.
If you got to win the black vote, I think she's well on the way to winning that. She absolutely has to do that.
But John, isn't that such a big college state? There are a lot of colleges in North Carolina. Isn't there a big millennial population there?
Sure, and you know the key point here on all of these groups when we talk about them is not just the margin by which somebody's winning, but also are they turning out? So she can be doing very well with any one of these individual groups, but then the question is, are enough of them turning out? And that's particularly a question with millennial voters.
And right now she's doing in North Carolina exactly what she's doing in Virginia. She is winning white women with college degrees. She's doing the same thing in Virginia. So we're seeing the same trends in North Carolina we're seeing in Virginia.
But she's not carrying white women overall. In fact, one of the things that jumps out of the exit polling data is that Trump is carrying white women in Georgia, Virginia, Ohio, and North Carolina.
One of the things we've seen in this race is that the thing to keep the eye on is the education gap, the difference between voters who have a college degree and those who don't. And Donald Trump is winning with those without a college degree, but it's Hillary Clinton has an edge for those with a college degree, but that's different by state. And so we have to watch state by state. In the polls, she has been down by a pretty good number with college-educated white women in Florida. So it's not a rule that applies to every state.
You know, it's interesting, too, that Hillary Clinton chose to make her last stop, her midnight rally, in Raleigh, North Carolina, at the end of the night.
Yeah, and I don't think we should miss a point here about how significant this race is. Whoever wins tonight will be making history. Hillary Clinton, I've seen women, many people will be surprised, Scott, to hear that women are not supporting Hillary Clinton, given what we've heard from Donald Trump. But I saw interviews with many women of all ages saying, look, I'm just so sick of Washington. I'm really kind of sick of her. I just want something different. And maybe I may not agree with what he says. He said some inappropriate things, but it would be a change, and they are so desperately craving a change in Washington, D.C.
One of the things that the exit polls have told us is a very large number of voters think change is the most important issue for them.
Most important. Let's go over to Elaine Quijano, who is at the social media desk. Elaine?
Well, Nora, you've been talking about North Carolina. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. But first, I want to share with you a tweet from Indiana Governor Mike Pence, of course, Donald Trump's running mate, thanking Indiana, as he said in this tweet, for making our state first on the board to vote to make America great again at real Donald Trump. What we've also seen, though, in North Carolina, specifically out of Durham County, there is a hashtag now on Twitter that is trending right now, hashtag stay in line. There were some reports of issues with electronic voting, and we have some social media posts to show you of the line in Durham County. What we know comes from our campaign embed, Sean Gallitz, who says that the North Carolina State Board of Elections just approved extended hours in 8 locations because of reports with issues reports of issues with this electronic voting. Now, those 8 precincts are out of 57 precincts in Durham County. So some of this video that we're seeing here reflecting what we're seeing. Even Hillary Clinton, I'm just being told, has tweeted and is tweeting about this situation still going on. So we're going to continue to monitor those reports on social media out of Durham County, North Carolina, and update you with the latest. Scott and Nora?
One of the states that Donald Trump nearly has to win is Ohio. That's another one of our battleground states. It's a toss-up state, and that is where we find Dean Reynolds tonight. Dean?
Scott, history says that he has to win Ohio. No Republican has won the presidency without this state. And we were talking earlier in the evening with Attorney General Mike DeWine of Ohio, and we asked him, you know, he's a Republican, where would he be looking tonight? What area would he be looking for an early indication of how things are going? And he said Mahoning County in northeast Ohio. That includes Youngstown. That's a home to a lot of displaced blue-collar workers, and he wonders how deeply the inroads that Trump could make into that voting bloc, and whether or not the Clinton campaign can offset that erosion of traditionally Democratic voters by gathering support of at least nominally Republican voters in the suburban areas around Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati, Republicans for whom Trump may be a bridge too far. Now, the early voting, which comprised about 23% of all registered voters in the state, reached 1.8 million. That's about 11,000 more than voted early in 2012. And those are the first votes that are going to be tabulated tonight. We're going to be hearing those numbers first, and then the other parts of the state later. The Mahoning thing, though, is key, and it was key also 4 years ago, because then we could see certain levels, certain targets that President Obama had to hit if he was going to defeat Romney, and he hit him, and we knew early on in Ohio who was going to win the state. That may be taking place tonight. We can't really say for sure. You've seen the exit polls. Trump is winning among men. Mrs. Clinton is winning among women. Trump is winning among whites. I would say, though, that Rob Portman, the incumbent senator here, the Republican senator, has won easily. Possibly he could have coattail effect for Trump that would help Trump carry the state. But again, he has to win Ohio, or he's not going to win the presidency.
Dean Reynolds for us tonight. Dean, thank you very much. I was in Ohio talking to voters, and there was so much anxiety, sort of an identity crisis among them. I was talking to a suburban woman who had worked for Republican campaigns, but she told me she just couldn't vote for Donald Trump. On the other hand, I went to a steelworkers union hall. The only portrait of a president on the wall is FDR.
I saw that.
There's a Hillary Clinton sign on the door, and the steelworkers are telling me they're going to vote Republican for the first time in their
Scott,
lives.
What I remember about that report is that there was a husband and wife who were speaking to each other because they
couldn't watch the debate together. They had to separate into different rooms.
But in Ohio, Scott, even the governor of Ohio didn't endorse Donald Trump. John Kasich said, I'm writing in for someone else.
That's right.
For John McCain.
And was in an open conflict with their party's nominee, as basically was the Republican Party of Ohio. So it is the sort of ground zero for the conflict in the Republican Party that we saw in many different places.
Yet the Clinton campaign spent a lot of time there, brought out the heavy hitters, LeBron James, who was beloved in that state, Beyonce and Jay-Z, also beloved really in the country when it comes to...
Or the world.
Yeah, I was going to say when it comes to Queen Bee, she's globally loved. And I thought, John, you had such a great point the other day on CBS this morning when you said, yeah, that's very good if Beyonce and Jay-Z were running and they had a voting booth on the stage, maybe that would have worked. But does that enthusiasm translate to votes for Hillary Clinton? And
in
did it.
Ohio, it goes beyond celebrities.
Yes.
And it goes beyond names. It's about jobs. It's about trade.
And we're learning some interesting things from the exit polls. And we asked specifically voters in Ohio, what about trade with other countries? And 46% say trade takes away jobs here in the U.S. And that's why we see this split among the exit polls in the union vote, why it's a toss-up at this hour. What does that tell you, though, that Ohio is where it is at this hour? I mean,
well, what it tells me, and to Scott's point about union households and the exit polls, of those who live in a union household, 50% of those are going for Donald Trump, 44% for Hillary Clinton. To Scott's point, what it tells us is that Ohio has been changing since they were voting for FDR. It's a state in which the working class in Ohio has been trending towards the Republican Party. There's not a huge African-American constituency at about 14% in Ohio, so the coalition for Clinton there is different than in a state like Virginia, where she can put together a little something different.
Did the Republicans come home in Ohio? We know that educated women did not, but did the Republican vote over the last several weeks come back to Donald Trump?
I think if he's going to do well, the Republicans must have come home to him. And also, though, he's getting these Democrats. Right. I mean, and we'll see how it breaks out across the stage. There was great worry in the Ohio Republican Party, and this is why there was the split, that those suburban white women around Columbus and around Cincinnati were not going to vote for Donald Trump.
Ohio has always been, for the most part, in the pathway for Donald Trump's road to the presidency. It's not been one of the key points in the Clinton road to the presidency. They knew it was going to be a tough state for a long time.
Donald Trump's getting 88% of the Republican vote in Ohio. So they're doing well for him. We found in the polling the states where Donald Trump did well are the states where he got a big share of the Republican vote. We found in the battleground tracker in Pennsylvania before this election day came upon us that he was only getting 78% of the Republican vote. That's why he was many points behind Hillary Clinton. So to your question, Charlie, it looks like the Republicans are coming home for him. The same number of Republicans voting for him as Democrats for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah. So are you all saying that Beyonce didn't make a difference in Ohio?
She may have made a difference.
That's going to break hearts all around.
Not in their voting.
We're certainly saying we love lemonade.
Yes, we really do.
Anthony Mason is keeping track of the exit polling information. He's been looking at what voters in Georgia have been telling us today. Anthony?
Yes, Scott. The last Democrat to win Georgia was Bill Clinton back in 1992. African-American turnout and voting there, key to the Democrats' hopes in Georgia. 8 years ago, when Barack Obama first ran, the African Americans made up 30% of the vote in Georgia. As you see, this time around, it's roughly the same. Hillary Clinton is winning 9 out of 10 black votes in Georgia today, but Donald Trump is taking 7 out of 10 white votes. So a sharp divide by race, but also by gender. Let's look at men and women, and you can see Donald Trump is winning men 57 to 38%. Women are going for Hillary Clinton 54 to 41%. But again, African American turnout key in Georgia to the Democrats' hopes. Not clear that they're getting it, which is why Trump has the edge in Georgia right now. Gail?
All right. Thank you very much, Anthony. Continuing with the exit polls, it says 82% of Trump voters wanted change. 90% of Clinton voters said experience is most important. What does that say to you, Bob Schieffer?
Well, I think it just shows the break and the divide that we're going through right now. I mean, that's right. Trump voters wanted change, and they saw him. Maybe they didn't think he could make the change, but at least he could thumb his nose at the establishment.
I do think there were some voters who wanted change, but did not think Donald Trump was the right vessel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One interesting finding from the exit polls we have here on the question of honest and trustworthy. That was a huge question for Hillary Clinton throughout this campaign, and there was a long stretch where Donald Trump was seen as the more honest and trustworthy candidate. In the exit poll tonight, when asked that question, 37% said Hillary Clinton is honest and trustworthy. 32% said Donald Trump was. So she has, at least according to the exit polls at this moment, flipped what was the case for much of this campaign.
Yeah, but when you look at how voters feel about Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, they're not flattering. When they talk about the attributes for Donald Trump, words like stubborn, arrogant, sexist. When you asked about Hillary Clinton, stubborn again, not willing to admit her mistakes, and flip-flops. None of those are qualities that you think, that's who I want in a leader, but on either candidate.
But now that people do seem to think that she's more trustworthy than Trump, well, I guess progress is where you find it.
We'll be coming back with more Campaign 2016 in just a moment.
And welcome back to CBS News election night coverage. Here's the electoral map. It's early still in the night. And as you can see, Hillary Clinton with 3 electoral votes, Donald Trump with 24 electoral votes. We've got some 13 battleground states that we're watching very closely tonight. And if you've been watching our coverage, you know there are already some breadcrumbs along the way about how this night may go. We've already spoken with the Trump campaign tonight. Now we want to speak with the Clinton campaign and Brian Fallon, who is the press secretary. Brian, good evening.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. First, tell us how the campaign is feeling at this hour.
Well, we really feel, based on what we're seeing so far today, that what you're seeing is a rise of the Clinton coalition. This is a issue where, coming into the election, I feel a lot of people thought that it was an open question whether Hillary Clinton could galvanize support from the Obama coalition that helped power President Obama to victory in 2008 and 2012. And what we're seeing in the early voting and then in the turnout today suggests that Hillary Clinton has not just reassembled that Obama coalition, but actually expanded on it. It's being powered by a surge in the Latino vote. In a state like Florida, you saw the early voting figures from Latinos double to more than 1 million Latinos voting early in Florida. I think that's going to help us break 2012 turnout levels in terms of Miami-Dade County, which is a huge powerhouse county for Democrats. You can't win Florida without running up the score in Miami-Dade. If you look at Nevada, you're seeing record turnout in the early vote in Clark County, which is a huge Democratic stronghold area. And even in a state like North Carolina, which we think is going to be tight and probably going to be late to be called, where initially there was some talk about a drop-off in African-American turnout. We not only made up gains there in the second week of early voting in North Carolina, but we actually offset it with a surge, 83% increase in Latino participation in early voting in North Carolina. So I think that's going to be one of the emerging storylines tonight.
Brian, another emerging storyline from our exit poll information is that Donald Trump is leading Hillary Clinton among white women in Ohio, North Carolina, Georgia, and Virginia. Does that surprise you?
This was a demographic that he was leading with from a very early point in the race. I think that overall, the story with respect to white voters may be the huge break and split that you see in terms of college-educated white voters. This is overrepresented in places like the collar counties outside Philadelphia. That may swing the state of Pennsylvania to us, which will essentially block the path for Donald Trump. If Hillary Clinton wins those voters, it will mark an improvement, again, another area where she outperforms 2008 or 2012 in terms of growing the Democratic coalition beyond the base of support that powered President Obama to those historic victories in 2008 and 2012.
And Brian, just quickly, the state of Michigan, any concern there?
Michigan, we've been pleased with what we've been seeing so far. In fact, I think that the day after this election, one of the mistakes that the Trump campaign will look back on is their failure to contest a state like Michigan earlier on. We never took it for granted, even though it was late to the battleground map in the minds of some. We actually had 35 offices open there. We had a full staff in place there. We were always built to win a very close race, and that's what I think is going to happen tonight.
Brian Fallon, thank you so much for joining us there in the Javits Center, which the Clinton campaign chose especially in part because it has a glass ceiling. Yeah. And they are hoping that there will be a crack in the glass ceiling tonight. That was a strategic choice by them.
It's a safety. It's obviously paying a lot of attention to Florida, making, as you mentioned earlier, this has been their message for a while, that the Latino vote is turning out in Florida and that's what's going to give them the edge. But it sounded like on Michigan, there's still something to watch there. Yeah. There was less of an easy, quick response about how it's going so perfectly well for them in Michigan. And while winning Florida would be a huge deal for Hillary Clinton, there is still that back door about Michigan that Democrats are sending me emails about saying it's tight in Michigan, worried in Michigan.
Yeah.
Well, Donald Trump has to win some state that traditionally goes Democratic in order for him to win the election.
That's right. Or run the table on the battleground states. I mean, so the more traditional Democratic states he can take, the more breathing room he has in a state like Florida and Ohio, although he's still got to win those two, probably.
All right.
We're back with more. You're watching election night coverage on CBS. We're back now with more campaign 2016 election night coverage. Bob Schieffer, what are you seeing in these early hours?
I still think the most important thing is finding out how many Latinos, this Hispanic vote. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that most Hispanics are not going to vote for Donald Trump. I think this is very important. What we're seeing in Florida, we're seeing it in North Carolina. I want to know more about how many Hispanics did turn out.
What's important about that is what the Clinton spokesman just said. It's the Latinos are part of creating a new Clinton coalition, adding to the Obama coalition in 2012.
Right now, what the exit polls are telling us is 18% of the vote is Latino. In Florida, that's up 1 point, and Romney got about 40%, and Clinton and Trump's getting 31.
All right, we're getting close to the top of the 8 o'clock hour. Polls close in 16 states, and we have a close eye on the battlegrounds, including Florida.
Welcome back to CBS News coverage of Election Night Campaign 2016. It is now 8 o'clock in the East. Polls are closed in half the states, including 3 more of those battlegrounds that will decide the presidency: Florida, Pennsylvania, and New Hampshire. In the race to 270 electoral votes and victory, Donald Trump has 51. Hillary Clinton, 30.
Yeah, let's take a closer look at those battleground states that just closed, starting with Florida. The Sunshine State means the moon to Trump's presidential hopes, and right now it is a toss-up. Pennsylvania, the Keystone State, is another possible key to victory. A toss-up there, too. And New Hampshire, that is a toss-up, too, so polls are closed now in 7 battleground states, and we can't project a winner in any of them. Both candidates, however, did pick up more electoral votes. We project Trump the winner in South Carolina, Oklahoma, and Tennessee, and Clinton gets Massachusetts, Maryland, Delaware, and the District of Columbia. Scott, I was thinking we ought to dig in right to these states. I mean, Florida has just closed, and there are some interesting numbers that we're learning out of the exit polls, too, John. We've been talking about the Hispanic votes, and it looks like 64% of Hispanics breaking towards Clinton, 30% towards Trump. So he is underperforming what Romney did in that state.
Right. Romney got 39% of the Latino vote, and there is 1% more of the Latino vote. It was 17% of the electorate in 12. It's 18% now. But we're still at the toss-up stage, so that's only one piece of the puzzle in Florida.
Florida is certainly a must-win state for Donald Trump, not necessarily for Hillary Clinton.
That's right. That's right.
Well, let's have a look at the board, shall we, and bring the audience up to date on exactly where everything is. As you can see there, we're estimating that at this point, Hillary Clinton has 44 electoral votes, Donald Trump 51. And the states that you see in red are the states that we have projected victory for Donald Trump. The states in blue are the states that we have shown, that we have estimated victory for Hillary Clinton. The states that are in white, these critical states that are in white, are states where the polls have closed, but the vote totals are so close that we're not able to make an estimate in those races. Believe us, the moment we can make an estimate in any of those races, we will do so and drop whatever we're doing to bring you the breaking news.
One of the other states that closed at the top of the hour at 8 o'clock, Pennsylvania, a state that the Democrats have felt comfortable about, but certainly there are many things in the state of Pennsylvania that Donald Trump could turn his way. He's made a big play for the state of Pennsylvania. We've been talking about white college-educated women. Clinton has turned them out 58%. That's 20 points higher than Obama got. He got 38% of the white college women. Does that suggest that something shifted big in Pennsylvania?
You heard Brian Fallon talking about those color counties. So the suburban counties around Philadelphia, 2 keys for Hillary Clinton in Pennsylvania. Turn up the African-American vote in the cities in Pittsburgh and in Philadelphia, and do well with white college-educated women in those collar counties. The women who throughout this campaign felt a nervousness about Donald Trump on that central question of whether he has the judgment and temperament, and the people that Hillary Clinton constantly tried to keep the image of Donald Trump saying things about women and some of his other more controversial comments in front of those voters to keep them from drifting back to the Republican ranks.
So how do we know what we know? We have for decades on Election Day sent reporters reporters out all across the country to talk to voters as they've left the polls and ask them how they voted and why they voted the way that they did. Anthony Mason is collecting all of that information for us tonight. Anthony?
Scott, we're going to look at the Hispanic vote in Florida, but to start, 27 million eligible Hispanic voters in this country now. That's a record, 12% of the electorate. In Florida, though, it's higher, 18%, and Hillary Clinton is leading among Hispanic voters in Florida. She's taking 62% of the Hispanic vote to 33% for Donald Trump. But there's an interesting split among Hispanics there. Cubans, traditionally Republican, are going for Donald Trump by a 53 to 41% margin. Other Hispanics, though, and they are now a larger voting bloc than the Cubans, are dominated by Hillary Clinton, 70 to 25%. So she's doing really well with that group. Gail?
All right. Thank you very much, Anthony. Bob, you went out on a limb saying you think that most Hispanic voters will go for Hillary Clinton. Seems like you're pretty safe on the limb.
Sturdy limb.
Yeah, it's a very sturdy limb. You're in very good shape. But they also say this. 59% of the Florida voters who we talked to today say immigrants help in the United States. 27% say immigrants hurt the United States. What do you have to say about that, John?
Well, if there is a single policy idea that Donald Trump brought into this campaign, it was immigration. It was the beginning of his election kickoff when he rode that escalator down. He talked about immigration. He was constantly talking about immigration. So this is a very important policy point for his base. But tonight it's all about the battle of the bases. And while on the one hand the base was turned out by Donald Trump and his talk of strong immigration controls, on the other hand the new coalition that Hillary Clinton may be creating was in part perhaps driven by a strong reaction to Donald Trump's
I think many people won't forget where he talked about the wall.
I do want to continue to talk about the Hispanic vote. Forgive me, we're just going to make a quick call here. CBS News is projecting that Hillary Clinton is the winner in Illinois, the state that she grew up in, talked about, where she learned her Midwest values. She's reminded us on the campaign trail, but not a big surprise.
That's not a surprise that she would win her home state of Illinois. That would be a very bad sign if she did not win Illinois, John Dickerson.
But Gail, you were talking about the Hispanic vote.
Yeah, that many people still know are smarting over his comments as he rode down the escalator. That was the first sign that this would be a very unusual type of campaign, his entrance. But he talked about building the wall, and that was the first time that, you know, it was a jaw-dropping moment when he referred to Mexicans as rapists. Many people still have not forgotten those comments from that day one.
Yeah.
The irony, of course, is that the very first people that he insulted may have the last word tonight.
Yes. That's ironic.
Charlie Rose is with our political panel, and they have been talking about Hispanic voters tonight. Charlie?
Thank you very much, Scott. We've continued this vote about Hispanics. I want to talk to Leslie Ruth Marcus here and Leslie Sanchez and Frank Luntz. Frank, what do you think is going on in the Hispanic community, and how large will this turnout be, and how influential is it in this election?
If the white community is angry, the Hispanic community is insulted. They were insulted by the language that Donald Trump used. They were insulted by the tone. And every time he would say that Mexico was going to pay for the wall, and whenever he talked about immigration policy, they felt like he was telling them they weren't welcome. And every time that he said to the Hispanics, they love me, they don't. And I'm looking across the country, and it's not just on border states. It's also states like Colorado, Illinois. The Republican Party in general, and Donald Trump in particular, cannot win when you are only getting 25 to 30% of the Hispanic vote. You cannot put together a majority, and they are the fastest growing segment of American society and the greatest switch away from the GOP over the last 10 years.
And I'd say one other thing to that, which is you use the word insulted. I would actually use the word incensed, because I think that
driven to the polls.
Driven to the polls. But you know, if you're insulted, you might sit home and just seethe. They're going.
If you're incensed, you will get in the car and go vote.
You're getting in the car, and it's not just. I suspect it will be not just the Hispanic community. We saw this 4 years ago with Asian voters. Who would be typically Republican voters deserting Mitt Romney. I think you may see that again, maybe in even greater numbers this year. So when you insult kind of one ethnic minority and a bunch of immigrants, you insult even more than the Hispanic population.
I think you're talking about. I think the question tonight is this going to be the largest rejection of a GOP nominee in basically recent history? Republicans have earned about 31% of the Hispanic support for the last 10 presidential elections. The question is he going to perform below that? Are we going to get him Bob Dole territory of 21%. But one thing I would caution is that big wave, what he has managed to do is unite a dormant Hispanic community that it doesn't vote in the numbers that they can.
The Clinton camp is saying there's a new coalition. It includes Hispanics, and it's a larger coalition than even Obama had.
And I'd say it's way too early to see that. Barack Obama made the same declaration in 2008, and then Republicans won control of the House in 2010. He made the same declaration in 2012, and the GOP won Congress and the governorships in 2014. These things are temporary. But make no mistake, Charlie, both Republicans and Democrats are looking at these numbers and saying that this group that is moving so fast, that is growing so fast, is going to be a nightmare for the GOP going forward unless they adopt a new message and new policies.
Well, and the GOP knew that, right?
Yes.
4 years ago, we had this famous autopsy. They diagnosed their problem. They set out the
So
solution.
their problem was on outreach. We've got to reach out.
No, specifically immigration reform. Where was it? What are they going to do now?
We have to go back to the desk, Nora.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. And CBS News projects that Rhode Island goes for Hillary Clinton. One of the big stories of the night is control of the U.S. Senate. Juliana Goldman has been following the Senate races tonight. Juliana?
Well, Nora, we are ready to make the first call for a Democratic pickup in the Senate. In Illinois, it looks like Congresswoman Tammy Duckworth has beat incumbent Republican Senator Mark Kirk. That is one of the first calls. Again, that's the first call that we are able to make for a Democratic pickup in the Senate. Remember, Democrats need to pick up 5 seats to take control of the Senate, 4 if Hillary Clinton wins, because Tim Kaine would be vice president and he would be the tie-breaking 51st vote.
All right, that adds one more woman to the United States Senate. And, you know, Tammy Duckworth, the first member of Congress born in Thailand, also a Purple Heart winner. Yes. She is a double amputee, of course, lost both of her legs in the Iraq War to helicopter pilot. It had been a contentious Senate race there, but she is now, according to CBS News, heading to the United States Senate.
Strongish.
First Republican loses his seat tonight in the Senate.
And he was considered the most vulnerable of all the Republicans on the ballot tonight.
John Dickerson, you were just telling us about a warning sign for the Trump campaign that you were noticing in the exit poll data that we have coming in.
One of the key questions is whether Donald Trump's strategy of really paying close attention to white voters was going to pay off. Now, Ronald Reagan won with 54% of white voters. Mitt Romney got 59% of white voters and lost. The difference, the share of white voters. There were more of them in Ronald Reagan's day. Well, right now, the exit polls suggest that only 70% of the electorate is white voters. In 2012, it was 72%. So Donald Trump is working with a smaller group. Within that, non-college white voters, in 2012, they were 36% of the electorate. Now they are 34% of the electorate. These are not huge numbers, but in a very close race, if your base is not turning out, and the premise of the Donald Trump campaign was not just that he would match Mitt Romney's numbers, but that he would grow them. Right now, it does not look like he's growing.
In fact, one Republican Senator, Lindsey Graham, has said his own party is in a demographic death spiral. Tonight, we've seen that the share of the white electorate is getting smaller and smaller. As
America's changing, and so is its politics.
Yes, and we have a projection in the state of Mississippi goes to Donald Trump. He is the winner in that state. Expected victory there and a large win for him there. All right, the Democrats are hoping to take back the Senate. We'll look more at those key Senate races and more states closing at the top of 8:30 when we're back here on CBS News Election Night.
Back now with CBS News Election Night coverage. Let's look at the state of the race right now at this moment. This is the Electoral College map. The colored states you see now are the ones where the polls have closed. The blue states signify victories for Hillary Clinton. The red states, victories for Donald Trump. Right now, at this early stage, the Electoral College totals are Clinton 68, Trump 57. And of course, 270 needed to win. Now you ask, what about those white states here? This is the whole ball game, folks. Many of these states are going to be deciding who the president of the United States is, and these states are so close right now. we can't make a projection about the winner. Anthony Salvanto is our director of elections. He's running the decision desk back here. All of our experts who are watching the exit polling information and all of the actual vote data coming in. Anthony, let's look at Florida quickly.
Sure.
Donald Trump must win it. There's no question about that. Tell us what's happening there right now. Why is this so close?
Well, that's right, Scott. This is critical to his path. And I'll tell you, the story in Florida right now is a story we're seeing in a number of battleground states. And that is that even though Hillary Clinton is doing well down in the areas where Democrats typically do well, and that's down around Miami, getting decent turnout there, getting the percents of vote that she probably needs in and around Miami. But Donald Trump is outperforming Mitt Romney and typical Republicans in a lot of these other Republican-leaning counties. And one by one, that's adding up his totals. So we see him outperforming typical Republicans, and that's keeping this race close.
Again, red for the Republicans, blue for the Democrats.
Yep.
Look at this, 60% of the precincts reporting, and it's a virtual tie.
And that is dead even. You know, there was a lot of early vote here, Scott, and that's a lot of what gets counted fast. We thought that the early vote looked like it would be even, and lo and behold, it is. It's very even, including in what was cast before today.
Now let's look at another state extremely important to both candidates, and that's North Carolina.
Yeah, North Carolina is actually a similar story. I'll point you here in and around Raleigh-Durham. This is a place where Democrats typically do well, and no surprise, Hillary Clinton is. She's turned out a lot of her base so far. But all these red places that you see lit up, including down here in the western part of the state, with strong turnout and with Donald Trump outperforming what Republicans typically do, that right now is just about matching Hillary Clinton's margin. So she's got a little bit of an edge, but it's certainly not enough to say where this race is headed for sure right now.
Anthony Salvanto, our Director of Elections, thank you very much. And folks, the moment we can make an estimate on a winner of one of these states, we will drop whatever we're doing and you will be the first to know. Clearly, one of the big efforts on the part of the Clinton campaign, especially today, has been its effort to get out the vote, to get their voters to the polls. And Nancy Cordes, who is at the Clinton election night watch party tonight in New York City, has more on that. Nancy?
Scott, this is an operation that the Clinton campaign has been working on and building out for nearly 2 years now. And according to the newest numbers that they have given us, their volunteers have made 23 million voter-to-voter contacts since Saturday morning. That means door knocking. That means people calling other voters on the phone. In fact, we've heard stories about Clinton volunteers so thick on the ground in some of these battleground states, 100,000 volunteers today alone, that they say they've gone through their entire list, knocked on every door, and gone back again. Somewhat irritating, perhaps, if you live in a battleground state, but pretty effective. You were just talking about Florida, for example, where it is so close. Imagine if the Trump campaign had had the money or inclination to invest in a similar size get-out-the-vote operation. He might be leading by a point or two there right now. Instead, in Broward County, which is a county that went for President Obama in 2012 by 35 points, hit record turnout today at 6 p.m. Miami-Dade hit its record since 2012 by the time the polls closed as well.
Nancy Cordes at the Clinton watch party tonight. Nancy, thank you. As Nancy was saying, the Trump campaign has not invested nearly as much in the Get Out the Vote campaign today. And we have our Major Garrett at the Trump watch party tonight.
Scott, it's the most important decision Donald Trump made as he sought the presidency of the United States, to essentially subcontract his get-out-the-vote operations to the Republican National Committee. And in talking to senior Trump advisors in the week leading up to this election, I said, what worries you most? And they said that we're going to be close and that we're going to look at the election results and wish we had our own get-out-the-vote operation. And we don't, which means in certain respects, in certain precincts, certain states, we don't know as much as we need to know. And Scott, I can tell you this was a conversation that went on in the Trump campaign. And Trump was absolutely adamant. He wasn't going to invest in it, didn't believe in it, didn't think it was as important as what he saw in the adoring crowds, thousands of them he kept encountering on the campaign trail. What he may learn tonight in these very closely contested states like Florida, no Trump get-out-the-vote operation there. North Carolina, a small one, but not nearly large enough. Other states that will loom large in the evening, Pennsylvania, Virginia. Those are day of voting states. Not a lot of early vote in either one of those states. The Trump campaign not well positioned to get out the vote and identify the key constituencies that they need in those states. So across the board, Scott, the great lament from Trump and those who support him come tomorrow, if he loses, may be we should have invested where we didn't.
Major Garrett, thank you very much.
Yeah, really interesting to see those two differences between the two campaigns. Just want to show everybody right now what's happening in the state of Florida. We've talked about how this is such a key battleground state in Trump's path to victory. Look at this, 48 to 48. We are calling it a toss-up for a reason. 88% of the vote in. We'll have more additional states closing at the top of the hour when we come back.
The best political reporting every morning on CBS This Morning.
Polls are closed now in half the states. There is the map as we stand right now as we are approaching 8:30. Let's take another look at the Sunshine State, the state of Florida. It is a toss-up, 48 to 48. We'll have more when we return on CBS Election Night.
From WC.
Back now with election night coverage on CBS. Polls are closed in 26 states and the District of Columbia as America elects a president. No projected winners yet in any of the 13 battleground states that will tell the tale tonight. But in the race to 270 electoral votes and the presidency, Clinton has 68, Trump 66. We still have a very long way to go.
We do, and we're going to get to some of those individual states in just a moment, those battleground states. We're getting some really interesting numbers. But first, in the state of Florida, CBS News projects that Marco Rubio has won his Senate seat there in that state. I think it's fair to say that of the 16 Republicans that challenged Donald Trump for the nomination, Rubio may be the only one who's having a victory speech tonight. He wasn't going to run for the Senate. When he lost, he decided to get back into this contest.
And so many people wonder if his career was over, his political career was over after he dropped out of the race. I have relatives in Florida. I have relatives in Florida who said he talked so much about his dislike for the Senate.
Yes, exactly. Until the Republican leaders came to him and said, we're in danger of losing the Senate. We need to hold on to a seat in Florida, and you need to go back and run in that seat. He is now, along with Senator Portman in Ohio, one of the two Republicans who was able to get out from under Donald Trump. Even though Democrats tried to tie them, they were able to succeed. We don't know what the outcome in Florida is at the presidential level yet, but obviously Marco Rubio did better because we're able to make a projection there about Marco Rubio.
Well, let's have a look at the battleground states now. These are the 13 states that could go either way and will therefore determine the election. As you see that graphic there, Georgia, Virginia, North Carolina, Ohio, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and Florida, the polls have closed in all of those states, and they are all so close that we are unable to make an estimate of who is ahead or who is projected to win in those states. The states that you see below there, those polls will be closing later as we go on into the evening.
Scott, you and I were looking closely at the state of Florida, a must-win for Donald Trump. We've now got 91% of the expected vote in, and wow, the margin is razor thin, isn't it, Scott?
8 million votes cast so far, and they're separated by 70,000.
Wow. What's going on in Florida?
I'm working on it, Nora. So here's one thing that is not that doesn't help us. One is that in 2012, there were 67% of the electorate in Florida was white. Now it's only 61%. So that kind of a drop between 2012 and 2016, you would think would hurt Donald Trump, but he's neck and neck here tonight. So he's picking up some. The alternative is that Hillary Clinton is not turning out the vote in the way Barack Obama did. So we're just going to have to keep waiting to figure
What segment of the vote she's not turning out?
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, this is eerily like 2000. I mean, are we going to start hearing about hanging chads in a minute here?
In 2000, there were only 500 or so votes between Al Gore and President Bush.
But, John, didn't didn't Donald Trump and both Hillary Clinton spend a lot of time in Florida? Both of them.
Well, that's the cost of doing business in politics. When you have to pay attention to Florida and Ohio and North Carolina. I mean, they're battleground states for a reason. So they spend a lot of time there. What's interesting is, to Major's point about a ground game in Florida,
and Donald Trump lives there.
The Republican National Committee set up a ground game after the loss in 2012. Reince Priebus, the chairman of the party, said we have to have people on the ground working the doors, knocking on the doors, getting people to vote. But he set up a system, and the question is, how did that system work with the Trump campaign? That may be one of the after stories.
What do we know about the vote that has not been reported in Florida? Where is it coming from?
I'll let John look at that right now, and I can tell you this, though, the interesting breakdown between men and women, it's virtually split. I mean, women are going for Clinton 51 to 44 for Trump, and men, Clinton 44, Trump to 49. So you don't see a huge gender gap. You see a small gender gap there in the state of Florida. And independents almost breaking even, Clinton 44, Trump 45%. But the Clinton campaign has been saying Miami-Dade would be key to their victory, that they would be able to turn out the Hispanic vote and the African-American vote in large numbers, in part by the early vote and also on Election Day. If they don't do that, that means that Trump can win that state, and as of right now, with 90% the vote in, it's neck and neck.
Trump must win Florida in order to have a reasonable path to the presidency. It's not essential for Hillary Clinton, though. She can put together other ways to get there.
Yeah.
That's right, especially if she's, Virginia is edging towards Hillary Clinton. Again, if she wins the traditional Democratic states plus Virginia and North Carolina, then she's very much on her way to getting that magical 270.
If anybody was going into this, Nora, wondering whether there was going to be a blowout tonight, we now have the answer. This is going to be a very close race.
A very close race. I want to show you the state of Ohio, of course, because we've talked a lot about that state. Only about a third of the vote is in at this hour. But at this hour, Hillary Clinton is leading 50 to 45%. And as you can see, a very close margin there. I don't think we can make any assumptions right now because so little of the vote is in. And this is a state that Donald Trump is expecting to do well in. Some of the early signs suggest that he has the edge in that state, but there's the vote there.
Can I just say that we have, it appears that on Virginia we have it as leaning Dem now, not just edge, but leaning Dem, moving a little bit more warmly towards Hillary Clinton.
But North Carolina is still at edge?
Yes.
We see now, of course, the state of Virginia, which just has about half of the vote in, as John just mentioned. And Hillary there with about a 4-point lead, and that's why at CBS News we are estimating that Hillary Clinton has the edge in Virginia, and also now, Charlie, you just mentioned, in the state of North Carolina. I think we should just back up because we just went through the boards about what that means.
That's right. What does edge mean? What does lean mean? Yes. What does all of this mean?
Likely mean, yes.
Help the audience, please, with our definitions.
It means a little bit more than an edge.
Yeah.
It's like an edge, a lean, and then a likely.
Right.
Edge means it
and then
change.
You turn yourself around, and that's what it's all about. If you have an edge, yes,
that's called the hokey pokey.
I know, Gail. But anyway, in Virginia, if it's edge, that means it's quite close. That means that if there's a statistical anomaly, it could reverse itself for that candidate. If it is leaning, that means that reversal is less likely. And then if it goes past lean, then it's something where we might be in the neighborhood of making a projection.
So now she has the edge in Virginia. Do you think Tim Kaine played a role in that? Her running mate who's from Virginia, a governor, a senator, a mayor there?
At the moment, she leans in Virginia, yes. I mean, Tim Kaine, also another important thing.
She's leaning, it's not edging.
Robbie Mook, the campaign manager for the Clinton campaign, also was the campaign manager for the successful 2013 gubernatorial race in Virginia. So he knows how to do races in Virginia. That, plus the vice presidential pick, Tim Kaine, those all may have contributed to Virginia.
But Tim Kaine is an enormously popular politician in Virginia. You would have expected a lot better showing than this at this early point.
Yes, true enough, although it could be another piece of evidence in the idea that basically people vote for the top of the ticket, and vice presidents may not get you as much as you might want.
But North Carolina and Virginia are very similar, aren't they, in terms of profile?
They are similar, but, you know, Barack Obama won Virginia twice, and he traded. He won North Carolina
2008,
in 8,
but not in
and
2012.
So North Carolina is sort of more on the knife's edge than Virginia.
And Bob, you were saying?
I was just going to say, she's leaning in both states for basically the same reason. She's attracting the same voters in North Carolina that she's attracting in Virginia.
And those are whom?
Well, I mean, educated white women. She's getting the educated vote. She's getting the minorities. And it's pretty much stacking up the same way in both states. And I think that's significant.
The suburbs around Washington, D.C., a large growth there's Latino, there's also Asian voters in Virginia as well. The growth in the state is the newer kinds of voters who are more like Hillary Clinton. Virginia is such an important state because it is partially representative of the larger story we're talking about with America, which is as a state changes from traditionally Republican, where there's a large share of the white vote, to a state that is more mixed. And that's the story in Virginia, and that's also the story perhaps in the nation.
And for more about what this all means at this hour, Charlie Rose is with the political panel. Charlie?
Here we have Ben Domenech, the publisher of The Federalist. We have Michelle Norris from the Aspen Institute. She's a former NPR host. And Michael Gerson, the Washington Post columnist. So when you look at this so far, the results we've been listening, where we think that they may be leaning, where they may be more definitive, what do you see?
Well, I see the Republican Party tried again a white turnout strategy. Last time, a lot of wise heads, after the Romney loss, said that's not possible anymore. You need to accommodate a multicultural America with real outreach. That didn't happen in this election. Everyone knows in 20 years that can't work. But the question is, can it work this time again? And we're seeing mixed messages.
You think the lesson will be it cannot work in the future, so therefore we have a realignment of voter groups?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But I don't think they can go back to the pre-Trump message, though, because there are blue-collar workers who have said, we're here.
Yeah. To Michael's point, the real question for the Republican Party now is what comes next. And it seems in a lot of these different races, you see various senators running well ahead of Donald Trump in states like Ohio and states like Florida. And they're going to be returned to the Senate, and they're going to have to decide whether they're going to make a change in the policy approach, the agenda approach that they've had in the past, and whether they're going to try to reach out to some of the groups where Hillary Clinton has lagged Barack Obama. She's lagging behind him in young voters in Ohio and in Florida. The question sort of is, are you going to try to reach out to them? And that would probably require elevating newer, younger faces, people like Rubio himself, to lead the party.
Did it get derailed because of Donald Trump?
Of course it got derailed because of Donald Trump.
Like
this was a process. The Republican Party was leaning in the direction of reforming its agenda for a while. Trump really short-circuited that conversation. They're going to have to find a way to live with a coalition that includes some of his voters and then reaches out to others as well.
Well, let's remember they did that whole forensics report after the last election, and they didn't even take their own advice. And so, yes, they are going to have to do a lot of rebuilding. Even if Donald Trump wins, the party will have to do a lot of rebuilding to reach out to voters who are obviously very angry at the party itself, even though they were voting for a Republican candidate, and to reach out to Hispanic voters and to reach out to college-educated women, for instance, who are voting for Hillary Clinton.
Which seems to be the new coalition for the Democrats.
In very large numbers.
But there are splits within the Democratic Party as well.
Yes, there are. Yes, there are. And there are splits among the college-educated voters, and there are splits along economic issues that we see as well. And so the Democratic Party will probably have to do some rebuilding, but not to the degree that the Republican Party will.
Yeah, and I think if we have a President Clinton, she will have a decision to make to do real outreach, or whether she's precluded from doing that by her own base, the Sanders base of the Democratic Party. And that will be determined early in her presidency with the issues she picks.
She signaled that she wants to do that.
The biggest problem Republicans face is that nobody really trusts them to lead anymore. They're going to have to reassert themselves in a certain way, and I think that just relying on the same old pre-Trump message is not the way to do it.
Thank you all. Back to you, Scott.
Charlie, thank you very much. We're going to be back in just a moment. We're going to have a closer look at this race in Florida. More than 8 million votes counted. That's nearly all of them, and it is neck and neck. We're back in a moment.
Polls in more than half the country are closed at this hour, and this race is super tight in the state of Florida. It is a toss-up, too close to call, as Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton neck and neck with more than 90% of the vote in. One call that we do have and have made in the state of Florida is for Marco Rubio, who has won the Senate seat there. And Mark Strassman is there in Miami at Rubio headquarters. Mark?
Hey, Nora, Senator Rubio, in fact, has just taken the stage to claim victory here. He has defeated two-term Congressman Patrick Murphy and won re-election to the U.S. Senate. He made a joke right up the top saying this election that is going better than the last time he came out on stage in Miami when he was thumped in the Florida primary by Donald Trump. Many, but not all the people in this room, of course, will be rooting for Trump tonight. This race still has many bitter feelings among Rubio's supporters. And this race in Florida is, in fact, so close now. Trump seems to be ahead by about 100,000 or so votes. And the votes are starting to run out, too. Remember that Florida had 6.5 million folks who voted early. That's a record for the state and the most of any state that had early returns. And so even though Hillary Clinton left South Florida, the most popular part of the state, solidly Democratic with a 280,000 vote margin or so, Trump has managed to pick up votes in more conservative sections of the state, in North Florida and Central Florida along the all-important I-4 corridor between Orlando and Tampa. And at this point, the two cliches we've heard about Florida in this election are both true. One is that Trump cannot win the White House unless he wins Florida, and two is that this race was going to be extraordinarily close, and in fact it has been.
All right, Mark, thank you so much. Scott Pelley is over at the decision desk. Scott?
Nora, thanks. We're back here with Anthony Salvanto, our Director of Elections, and what that means is he's our numbers guy. He's working with all of our experts at the decision desk, taking in the information from the exit polls and the actual vote totals now, and it is Anthony who helps us make these estimates about who's ahead and who may be winning. As we were just hearing, Anthony, Florida, it's the entire ball game for Donald Trump, and my goodness, how close it is. How much of the vote has been counted so far?
Well, about 75% of what we expect the vote to be. But as the vote comes in, our expectations can actually move up. What we've seen now is the bulk of that absentee vote has been counted. And I will tell you, Scott, one of the things, Hillary Clinton is actually doing well for a Democrat. Down here, you mentioned Broward County. She is performing about where a Democrat typically does well. These counties here in South Florida, solidly Democratic. But here's the thing, Scott. Everywhere else in the state, she is just underperforming a typical Democrat, Donald Trump doing just a little bit better than typical Republicans do. Up here through the Orlando area, through Central Florida, and certainly up around near Jacksonville. You look at some of these counties, and he's doing better than Mitt Romney did. That is adding up little by little to keep him even with Clinton.
Well, let's have a look at what this says. They are of more than 8 million votes counted so far. They're separated by about 100,000.
Right, exactly. And that's
Donald Trump slightly ahead.
Donald Trump very slightly ahead in the vote count. In our models, we've got it even, and that's because what we do in the model, Scott, is we account for the number of registered voters who haven't yet had their ballots counted, and we look at it that way. So if you do that, then you look at a slightly more even race because not everything is in from some of these counties. But I will tell you, this is about as close as it gets.
Anthony Salvanto, our Director of Elections, thank you very much. So Donald Trump performing in Florida a little bit better than Republicans normally do. John Dickerson?
Well, Scott, let's see. I was just looking at the vote that Donald Trump is doing with white college-educated women. We've talked a lot about them tonight. That's a group that's very strong for Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump is winning with white college-educated women 58-39 in Florida. That's better.
Wait a minute, give us that again.
Donald Trump is up with white college-educated women in Florida in a way that he is not anywhere else.
You would not have expected that.
How do you explain that,
Well,
John?
she had been up.
How do you explain that?
He had, well,
that particular.
He explains there's an older electorate in Florida, so a lot of your college-educated voters are typical Republican voters. Mitt Romney won the white college-educated 57-42. So Barack Obama at 42 of white college-educated women in Florida is ahead of where Hillary Clinton is now at 39 with white college-educated women in Florida. So that's one area that Hillary Clinton is turning that vote out in other places, but apparently not enough in Florida, which is what makes it close, even though there are other parts of the state that she's turning out lots of Latinos.
Is there any other?
And the share of the white vote is actually smaller in Florida than it was last time around.
Is there any other place we know where Trump is winning college-educated women?
And not that, well, other than his red states.
Right.
I mean, in terms of battlegrounds,
Right.
I haven't found it yet.
Right.
It is a really interesting. I'm looking at those same numbers, too, as the same time you are. I mean, we're talking about 50 and 60% he's winning those white college-educated females, white college-educated males, sort of across the board. That may be why he's so close in the state of Florida.
And just for context here, Hillary Clinton nationally is winning white women with a college graduate degree 51 to 43. So by 8 points nationally for Hillary Clinton, but she's down by almost 20 in Florida.
91% of the vote counted in Florida so far.
That's right. All right. Coming up, polls close in the two-candidate state of New York. We'll talk about that. We've also got Arizona, Colorado, Michigan, New Mexico, Wisconsin, and a big state of Texas.
Big state of Texas.
The night is young.
The night is young.
Yeah.
More ahead. Coming up after this.
Back now with election night on CBS. It is 9 o'clock in the east, 6 in the west, and it is a tight race for president and a long time before we are going to know who won tonight. Polls just closed in 14 more states, including 4 key battleground states: Arizona, Colorado, Wisconsin, and Michigan. All 4 are toss-ups right now. Still no winner in any of the 13 battleground states that will decide this election tonight. In the race to 270 electoral votes and the presidency, Donald Trump has 123. Hillary Clinton has 97. It is still early.
And look at that, what is almost a river of red flowing right through the United States, up and down. We have a number of states. In the state of New York, home state to both of these candidates, CBS News projects Hillary Clinton is the winner. In the state of Texas, CBS News projects Donald Trump has won by a decisive margin. There is a large Hispanic population, but he won that state. In Kansas, CBS News projects Donald Trump is the winner. In the state of Nebraska, another state goes to Donald Trump with a large margin there. And in South Dakota, CBS News projects that Donald Trump will win that state when all the votes are counted. And North Dakota, CBS News projects that Donald Trump will win that state when all the votes are counted. And in Wyoming, Donald Trump is the projected winner as there.
This is pretty much what we expected.
Yes.
But the big headline of the hour is Florida. Almost all the votes, 91% of the votes have been counted in Florida. More than 8 million votes have been counted. And at this moment, Donald Trump is ahead of Hillary Clinton. They are separated by only 140,000 votes. Still much too close to call.
Can we talk, Scott, for a second about why he's doing so well with working women, educated women in Florida? When you look at all of the things that Trump has said with his issues with women, the Access Hollywood tape, the comments that he made about Alicia Machado, the accusation of sexual assault, starting with Megyn Kelly in that very first debate. How do we explain how this is possible?
Well, the Republicans who like him are willing to forgive him those things. We've talked to voters who are in the Trump camp, and they were the ones who said, "Oh, this is locker room talk," and this is that's part of it. They forgive him, and why do they forgive him? Because they don't like Hillary Clinton, and they think the country needs to be turned around, and they think that he can do it. Another thing about Florida, just that's true of all these other states that we're looking at that are battleground states, is that this is a debate here in the country right now between the cities and the rural areas. And what Donald Trump is doing well in Florida is he's doing well in 41 or so counties, 40 or more counties, all over the rural areas, doing a little bit better than Mitt Romney did. And Hillary Clinton is doing well in the cities. But that's the combat. So in these states, you'll see a sea of red, all the counties smaller in population that Donald Trump is doing well in, and then deep blue in the cities. And we're seeing that now in Florida, and we'll see it in all the battleground states.
And a point you made earlier, it's an older population, too.
Yes, and that's the difference between college-educated women in Florida versus college-educated women. If we want to look for another echo, perhaps we might look in Iowa, where the population is also older. We'll have to see what
What's the definition of older? I'm very curious, John. Careful.
Let's just say,
have to bring that up with someone other than me, Gail.
Let's just say that many of the
over 80.
Over 80.
Many of the
like
college
that,
85
are retirees in Florida.
I like that.
Let's have a look at our battleground tracking list here. This shows you the states that have polls that have been closed. So the polls have closed in all of the battleground states except for Iowa and Nevada. They're at the bottom. And folks, you would normally be looking for check marks on either side of the state name showing whether we have projected the race for Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, and you don't see any. And that is because all of these battleground races at this moment are so close that CBS News cannot yet make an estimate. But let's have a look at the electoral vote now, where it stands, snapshot in time. At this moment, Hillary Clinton with 97 electoral votes, Donald Trump with 123. But remember, there are 270 that are needed to win. There's some big Democratic states where the polls are still open. California, most notable among them. And so it is going to be a long, close race tonight.
Anthony Mason has all of the exit poll data. Anthony?
Nora, we wanted to break out the battle in the battleground state of Pennsylvania, where we knew there would be a substantial divide between the city and the rural areas. And there is, as you can see in our exit poll. Hillary Clinton winning basically 3 out of 4 voters in the city. Donald Trump winning nearly that margin in the rural areas. But as you can see, the real battle is there in the suburbs where it's dead even. Hillary Clinton finding strength among suburban women, winning them 56 to 40%. This was a group that went for Mitt Romney 4 years ago by 52%. So great strength there. But there was no early voting in Pennsylvania, and the late deciders are going to Donald Trump by a 52 to 39% margin. And that's why things are still close in Pennsylvania. Gail?
Yeah, that seems to be the theme of the evening. Thank you very much, Anthony. Too close in Pennsylvania, too close in Florida. Another interesting thing from the exit poll, college degrees. Hillary Clinton has 55% of those voters. Donald Trump has 41%. No college degrees. Donald Trump has 50% of that voting population. Hillary Clinton has 46. Now, last night, John, the Clinton campaign ended very strong with President Obama, Michelle Obama, Bruce Springsteen, and John Bon Jovi in Philadelphia on the steps of Independence Hall.
Yeah, the voting on Election Day is a bigger deal in Pennsylvania than in North Carolina or Ohio or any of these states where you have the early vote.
And we have a call in the state of Arkansas. Bill Clinton carried his own home state in 2 elections, but there's a little rock in a hard place tonight for the Clinton family as Donald Trump is the projected winner in the state of Arkansas.
Is this a surprise, Nora?
No, it was expected that he would win there.
But she was First Lady of Arkansas for quite a long time.
Now was the former senator from New York State, so she's won New York, lost Arkansas, the 2 states that she's spent most of her life in. Let's go back to the map as you've pointed out all night, Scott. 129 electoral votes for Donald Trump, 97 for Hillary Clinton. There's that river of red right down the United States. But
it does look like a river, too.
It does look like
down the middle.
But I'm really fascinated by what's going on in these battleground states that we have talked about all night. John, you were excellent in pointing out about what would be the storylines of tonight, we would know whether Donald Trump is having a good night or whether Hillary Clinton is having a good night. It's 9 o'clock. This is tight. Florida's tight. And Virginia, still tight?
It's very, very close, very tight. It's looking more like a map that you would expect if you had a generic Republican and a generic Democrat. There's not a wild success by, or they're both having success at the same time. So, yeah, it's getting tighter, so it feels like, as we go on.
Let me ask it this way. If you are inside Trump Tower tonight, you are looking at this map, what are you nervous about?
You're holding your breath.
Yeah.
Well, you're nervous because nothing's getting better. You're happy it's a toss-up life. Yeah. But remember, you've got to win more places. And so the probability of winning all of these that are very close, or winning more of these that are very close than Hillary Clinton is still tough.
Bob? You know, there have been no surprises tonight. I think that's very important to understand. The states we thought were going to go Democratic have gone Democratic. The ones we thought were going Republican so far has gone Republican. All of the battleground states are very close. The most, I guess, if there is a surprise, it is that Florida has not been called yet. It's very close. I'd still like to know what's going on down in Georgia. I think most people thought that would go Republican, although some of us called it a battleground state. But I think you're right, John and Nora. They've got to start winning something they weren't supposed to win if they're going to win tonight. That is their path to victory. So far, everything is going just about like we thought it was going to go.
But did we think it would be this close, though, John? Did we think that these battleground states would be toss-ups at this time of the evening?
Well, you know, it does take a little while for us to call them. Now, they seem to be getting tighter as the night goes on. Usually, you start to call one of these battleground states around 9-ish in the past 2 elections. So, you know, that's usually what happens. But we're just not there yet, but we knew it was going to be close because of the way the polls have looked. And now we're going to, you know, another state that we're going to talk about in a little while is Michigan, and that's another one of these great question marks because that's where Donald Trump made a last-ditch effort.
And that's a traditionally blue state.
That's right.
He spent a lot of time there. Well,
Charlie Rose is standing by with our political panel. Charlie?
Thank you, Scott. I'm with Republican strategist Frank Luntz, Peggy Noonan of the Wall Street Journal, and Michael Gerson of the Washington Post. Picking up on the conversation, why is it so close in the battleground states? Is that the nature of battleground states?
Tens of millions of dollars in advertising, get out the vote efforts like you haven't seen, phone calls, direct mail, emails, texts. These people have been watching politics 24/7 for the last 4 or 5 months, and so everyone's engaged, everyone's involved, everyone's voting, which is why it takes so long to count the votes, because the turnout's so high.
Peggy, same thing.
Yes.
You're surprised.
I
Is that
am.
close in these battleground states?
So far, I am. One of the things I'm thinking is, one of the problems Trump had is that he talked in a way about certain policies, like policies appealing to the working class, and it had some real power, but the way he talked about those issues and his approaches was limited or seemed to people to be talking to the white working class as opposed to the Latino working class, the black working class. Do you know what I mean? He started out with policy insights and then limited his own appeal.
Ronald Reagan used to say that Latinos had a natural home in the Republican Party.
He believed it. I believe it.
Yeah, I think Trump has benefited from extreme partisanship in America. I think never Hillary trumped, never Trump in many voters' minds. And this has made it closer. We're also seeing a real reaction against the establishment and globalization across the Western world. There's something going on having to do with populism and the reaction to elites.
Populism is about ideas. There's also a question of this election being about personality rather than ideas.
Yeah, I don't think issues matter. And in fact, I'm looking at the statistics from the exit polling. In terms of qualified, 53% said Hillary Clinton. She's been a United States Senator, Secretary of State, First Lady, and only 53% thought she was qualified. Donald Trump, it was just 37%. Having the right temperament, which was the biggest spread of any of them, 56% Hillary Clinton, only 34% Donald Trump. They did not vote on issues. They voted on candidate persona, and that's where Hillary Clinton had the advantage.
I think it was in part an issue election. I think Donald Trump had real insights on issues and policies that might have a profound impact changing the Republican Party, but he showed at the same time as he spoke and acted out and did his 3:20 a.m. tweets that it was reasonable for you as a voter to doubt his temperament, to doubt sometimes his stability, to doubt his character. That was his problem. There were issues, but he didn't do them well.
But this wasn't doubting. This was actually hatred.
I think
in some cases, yes.
In the aftermath of this election, America is going to need a healer with real skills to bring together the country. Neither of these candidates has shown that set of skills.
We'll come back to that point.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Back to Scott. Scott?
Charlie, thank you very much. John Dickerson?
You know, they're talking about what the next candidate has to do. I was talking to some Senate Republicans who were already, before this, we started to get results in tonight, were talking about what Hillary Clinton would have to do to reach out if she were to win. It was a bit of an odd conversation to have because the vote hadn't taken place. They were already assuming a bad night for Donald Trump, but they were already laying the markers that she had to meet, and they said she can't be a kind of Elizabeth Warren type a Democrat, very liberal. And so I guess the point is for whoever wins tonight, tonight. The traps are laid for them, and the score will already start being kept based on what they say in their victory speeches in terms of this question of whether a whole new round of partisan battle begins once the new president, no honeymoon. The minute they win, those partisan battles are going to pick up.
Are we to believe, though, John, that temperament doesn't matter? I remember very vividly, Nora, the debate that we covered, that Hillary Clinton said in the middle of the debate, he is not fit to be president. And I've never heard an opponent take on another opponent that way. You may disagree with his issues, you may disagree with some of his policies, but I've never heard someone say you are not fit for this job.
Well, that was his Achilles heel, and to the extent that voters felt that way and put that at front of mind about their worries about the candidate, that was when things were not going well for him. They started to go better when people could focus on him as a change agent in Washington, and they want Washington changed.
All right, looking at these battleground states, we have yet to call a battleground state. It's 9:15. Florida separated the two candidates by
20,000 votes.
Just about 20,000 votes at this hour. We'll have the latest from there when we're back.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, if they are watching CBS News inside the Trump Tower, they probably made a small cheer as we are watching this contest tonight. Not only is Florida a toss-up too close to call at this hour, but we had the state of Virginia as lean Clinton. It's now in the toss-up category. What's going on, John?
Well, it's getting closer for Trump. Remember when we talked about the difference between edge and lean? The idea was always that it could roll back the other way. And so now Virginia, which was leaning to Hillary Clinton, is now back in the toss-up category. So while things are tight in Florida, they're also now tight in Virginia.
But
so
do we know why?
We don't know why. Maybe Anthony knows.
That's why Scott Pelley has gotten up. See, Scott Pelley is no longer here because he's all the way over at the decision desk.
All right,
really
good.
Not that
Scott, you better have an answer.
I do not, but I bet Anthony Salvanto, our director of elections, does. He's our numbers guy tonight. Anthony, what's going on in Virginia?
Okay, I'll tell you why. The western part of the state is going for Trump very heavily, more heavily than we would have expected, even for a Republican.
Coal mining area,
part
farming
of the state,
area.
All this out here, exactly. Coal country, all out west of Roanoke, okay? Then, all over here in the D.C. suburbs, the place is so critical to Hillary Clinton. She is doing well, but just not well enough. Maybe 2 or 3 points tracking right now behind where she needs to be. So you look up here in places like Prince William and Loudoun, all of this taken together is tracking just a little behind where she needs to be.
And we want to remind the audience that blue is Hillary Clinton, red is Donald Trump. Donald Trump doing very well in the rural areas, Hillary Clinton confined mostly to the cities.
There's definitely that rural-urban split, but let me also say what I mean by needs to be, where people need to be. Each of these campaigns is going to have vote targets, people who reliably vote Democrat or reliably vote Republican. In a partisan race like this, if that's off even a little bit, it makes the state a lot tighter, and this is a pattern we're seeing in so many states, Scott.
Now let's have a look at Florida. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump both holding their breath and turning blue over Florida right now. There's been a record voter turnout there.
Yes, there has. And same pattern, okay, down here in the southern part of the state, Hillary Clinton doing well, but just not well enough. But here's the real story. You go out here in and around the Orlando area, everybody talks about the I-4 corridor as a swing area. But what Donald Trump is doing here is, it's not just swinging it, it's that he's adding up relatively small numbers of votes in all of these relatively smaller counties, and that is offsetting whatever Hillary Clinton can get in the Democratic counties. So it's that rural or suburban, even exurban areas where he's overperforming and, of course, doing well in the Panhandle.
93% of the vote has been counted in Florida. Trump must win Florida to win the presidency, and so far he's doing it.
Well, he is, but let me tell you, when we see percent in, sometimes precincts report, and you'll hear people say, oh, there's so many precincts reporting, but with so many absentee votes in Florida, those don't always come in as precincts. So you can sometimes see more votes than you see precincts, and that's what's going on here.
Anthony Salvanto, thank you very much. We will remain on Battleground Watch when we come back.
The battle for the battlegrounds continues at this hour. CBS News has yet to call any of those key 13 battleground states. Why? It's too tight. Look at the state of Florida. More than 90% of the vote in, and it is super tight there. Even Donald Trump holding a slight edge as the vote is still being counted. The Democrats were feeling optimistic when I spoke with them at about 3 hours ago. They said they thought they could turn out enough Hispanic and black voters. We'll see what's going on there.
Well, Nora, when Eric Trump was sitting in this seat this morning, right here on CBS this morning, he said they were going to win Florida. Maybe he knew something we didn't know.
Virginia also now the toss-up category. We'll go inside these states to find out what it may mean for tonight and who will be the victor. That's coming up right after this. It's CBS News Election Night.
Gentlemen, let's leave it there so I can ask a question of Senator Cruz, who's also running for president.
Gentlemen,
Nixon
the people at home cannot understand either one of you when you speak over each other.
This was WrestleMania.
Election night on CBS, it is still WrestleMania tonight as we have been unable to project any of the 13 battleground states that will decide this election. Let's go to our map that shows where the election stands right now. Well, we have our there it is. There's the map that shows you right where things are at this very moment. Red states are Trump. Blue states are those states that we have projected for Hillary Clinton. The states in white, ladies and gentlemen, are places where the polls have closed, but the count is so close, we are unable to project which candidate is the winner in those states. Hillary Clinton with 97 electoral votes, Donald Trump with 129.
Scott, we have something really interesting going on right now that we should talk about, and we'll go through these states one by one. I want to tell everybody. But a state like Michigan, that in the last election that we had called at 9 o'clock, it's now 9:30. We're not able to call that state. So let's go through, because I want to talk about a number of these states that we've not called at this point. We'll first start off with Pennsylvania. The current estimate there, CBS News estimate, that is a toss-up. Now, we have just 16% of the vote in, but again, this is based on actual votes, exit polls, and others, but it is a toss-up. Look at the state of Florida. 94% of the vote in, Donald Trump ahead by 2 percentage points. The Democrats were boastful to me earlier today. I'm getting radio silence right now asking them what's going on in that state.
He has to win Florida, and right now he is.
He is, and Ohio. Look at this. Another state that Donald Trump felt confident in, he's performing well, 53% of the vote in there. Let me get through these. Michigan, just 17%. Colorado first, forgive me. A toss-up in Colorado. And Michigan, a toss-up as well. John.
Well, so we got two different kinds of states here. The Rust Belt states are all linked, and why are they linked? Because we've talked about it earlier tonight. One of the key themes of this election is the difference in college education or not college education. If you look at the states, they all group together in terms of having a large non-college educated electorate. Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, they're all very close to each other. So the electorates are the same. And so Donald Trump is obviously doing well with that electorate. What's interesting is that Florida is a different kind of state. So he is doing two different kinds of things here. He's winning, or he's holding his own in two different kinds of states. And what's key here is that if he does well in Pennsylvania, then there's a chance he could do well in Michigan and Ohio and then Iowa.
Trump's theory of the case was that he would do well in the Rust Belt, that there was a vote there for him.
Because of this large share of the electorate that was non-college educated, blue-collar workers who are disappointed with Washington. They don't feel like the
upset about jobs and trade.
And also, there's a cultural piece to this. These are the ones when you hear "Make America Great Again." They
What does that really mean, "Make America Great Again"? Because when you talk to many people in this country, they'll say, "When was it not great?" What does that mean exactly? "Make America Great Again"?
Well, there's a gradation of of what that means. I mean, for some people, it means a world in which the economy is better, in which middle-class jobs are stronger. But for other people, it means a world in which there is not so much of a minority presence in America. And culturally, where the kind of liberal mores are not a part of my everyday experience. And so it gets very messy.
And he's talking to the steel workers in Ohio who have lost their jobs because of cheap Chinese steel. There's a steel mill in Lorain, Ohio that has been producing for more than a century. And it closed last spring, laid off 600 workers. Those are those people.
It's both cultural and economic.
Michigan has not voted for a Republican since 1988. Let's go now to Anthony Mason, who has the exit polls about what people think in that state. Anthony?
Yeah, Nora, it was George H.W. Bush, the last Republican to win the state of Michigan back in '88. Here are two key reasons why Donald Trump is competitive in Michigan tonight. The first is whites without a college degree. John was just talking about them. He's winning them 61 to 31%, a 2-to-1 margin. But what's significant here is he's outperforming Mitt Romney, who won this group with 55% 4 years ago. He's also winning men by a margin of 52 to 40%. Now, Donald Trump is winning men around the country, but men in Michigan went for Barack Obama 4 years ago, narrowly, but he won them on the way to winning the state. But these two changes are a big reason Donald Trump is competitive in Michigan right now. Gail?
Yeah, it's very interesting, Anthony. It's not just the non-educated voters that he's resonating with. Look at these numbers, guys. White college-educated voters, 50% are going for Donald Trump, 43% are going for Hillary Clinton in Michigan. What does that tell us, John, about what's likely to happen or what's going on in Michigan at this moment?
Well, it's a gender thing. So in other states, Hillary Clinton is winning white college-educated women by more than she is in Michigan. She's only winning them by 6 points. But look at how well Donald Trump is doing with white men with a college degree, almost 20 points ahead for Donald Trump with that group. So he's doing better culturally in Michigan than he would be doing in, say, a state like Pennsylvania, where Mitt Romney won white college-educated women by 11 points. Hillary Clinton is now up by 22 with white college-educated women. So that's really interesting because we're assuming that Pennsylvania and Michigan are alike, and in that case, they are not alike.
But you know, when he first started going to Michigan, we were sitting thinking, why is he going to Michigan? That's such traditionally a blue state. Why is it, Donald Trump, why is he spending time there?
Well, because of those
yeah, I see it. Yeah, I see it.
And we're not the only ones watching the results of the election as they stand so far. Wall Street is watching, and the Dow futures are down 400 points at this point. The market hates uncertainty, and if there's anything we can say conclusively about tonight, it is uncertainty.
Yeah, Michigan is one of those blue states that we talked about that Donald Trump wanted to pick up. He placed a $25 million ad buy in the final week of the campaign. Michigan was one of those states. Michigan is also a state that has a large African-American community, 15% out of Detroit, 15%. Hillary Clinton has performed well among that group. However, there's been some question about whether she was able to get black voters to the polls on Election Day. But noteworthy again tonight, Michigan, one of the battleground states that has trended blue in the past. The last time it voted for a Republican was in '88, and at this hour, it is a toss-up.
Want to remind everybody.
I'm sorry.
No, please, Bob, after you.
Squeeze in a word here. You know, we knew at the beginning of this evening, we have known for 2 months, this was a deeply divided nation. What we have found out so far tonight is we were right about that. Maybe we didn't understand how divided we really were.
Now, I want to remind everybody that we are watching these battleground states closely every second, and the moment CBS News can make an estimate of who is ahead or who is winning, we are going to stop whatever we're doing, and we're going to tell you about that. Well, and now we have one. Nora?
We do have a call in the state of Connecticut. Hillary Clinton has won in that state. She is the winner. Not a big surprise there, not a huge electoral cache of votes.
Not a big surprise there. Now Hillary Clinton has 104 electoral votes to Donald Trump's 129. Still very early yet, but the tale of the evening is going to be told in these 13 battleground states. Now, Nancy Cordes is following all of this for us from Clinton election night headquarters here in New York City. Nancy?
Scott, I just got off the phone with a top Clinton campaign official and asked him what the campaign makes of the situation in Florida, where you were just discussing how close the race appears to be right now. He said, look, we have been saying for 6 months that this race would be close, and that is what we are now seeing. He pointed out that not all of the votes in Broward County, the second most populous county in the state, are in yet. That is a big Democratic stronghold. But he also pointed out that their electoral strategy does not rely on winning Florida. Yes, they would love to win it, but they still continue to believe that their most likely path to 270 involves the battleground states of Nevada, Colorado, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Virginia. Now, you were also discussing the fact that Donald Trump appears to have made up some ground in Virginia, so I asked him what's going on there. He pointed out that Fairfax County, the most populous county in Virginia, Northern Virginia, has only reported about 50% of its votes so far. He said this happens every 4 years. Fairfax County reports late. Democrats start to freak out. They feel that they're losing the state, and they come back and win. And he says he's very confident that that's what's going to happen in Virginia. How confident? Well, we've already been told by the Clinton campaign that the Clintons, both Hillary and Bill Clinton, have been working with their speechwriters on a speech, making some final edits, and that those speechwriters have left the room and are now inputting those final edits. And that's significant because yesterday we were told that those speechwriters had prepared 2 different speeches for her, a concession speech and a victory speech. And the fact that they have settled on one means that they believe at this point that she's going to win.
Nancy Cordes, thank you very much.
And Nancy, if you can still hear me, is there any reporting from the Clinton campaign about what they think is going on in Florida?
You know, they say it's a nail-biter. They really weren't willing to make a prediction about whether she will win or not. They say it's just incredibly close. Same situation in North Carolina, and that's why they sent all of their resources down to those 2 states. But they say if they pull off one, if they pull off both, it'll be great, but they're not relying on the states the way that the Trump campaign is.
Nancy Cordes at Clinton campaign headquarters right now. We should point out, too, Scott, you first brought this up, the Dow now down 500 points. At the same time, we have a CBS News projection at this hour. In the state of Louisiana, Donald Trump is the winner.
No big surprise there, of course. That's not a battleground state. Expected it to go Republican all along. But let's have a look at our map status of the race right now as it stands. Hillary Clinton with 104 electoral votes, 137 for Donald Trump, 270 needed to win. The red states we have projected for Donald Trump. The blue states we projected for Hillary Clinton. The states in white are those states that the polls have now closed, but they are too close to make a projection. Major Garrett is at Trump campaign headquarters for us tonight. Major?
Scott and Nora, earlier this evening, there was a definite despondency within Trump Tower looking at the exit poll data and what they were seeing and hearing based on reports from battleground states. That has turned to cautious optimism. And one thing I heard repeatedly from senior Trump advisors was, look, the exit poll data doesn't look good, but we are going to overperform the exit poll data. Just as we predicted to you, we would overperform public polls. How much? Maybe 1 or 2%. The trend lines we're seeing tonight, according to Trump Tower, reflect that overperformance of what is noted in the exit polls and the public polling of these battleground states before votes actually started being counted. Let's talk about Florida for a second. Just got off the phone with Susan Wiles, who is the Florida director for the Trump campaign. Her direct quote, we feel pretty darn good about the prospects in Florida. But the Trump campaign, just like the Clinton campaign, waiting to see what happens in heavily Democratic Broward County to tip the scales one way or the other in Florida. But it is worth pointing out, Florida is an absolute must for Donald Trump. There is no path without Florida, and they would like to see more encouraging trend lines in North Carolina, Virginia. They're encouraged by Pennsylvania and Michigan, but they have yet to see that breakout state where they can achieve that clear path to 270. Everything is very close. They are not nearly as discouraged as they were earlier this evening, but they are still looking for a momentum builder, a battleground state that goes for Trump and that builds momentum as they try to reach that 270 mark.
Major Garrett, thank you very much. 13 battleground states that will decide the election tonight, states that could go either way, and right now all of them could go either way. We'll be back in just a moment.
best political reporting every morning on CBS This Morning.
It's election night on CBS, and what an election night it is. Let us show you where the race stands right now at this moment. This is our map of the Electoral College vote. We have Hillary Clinton with 104, Donald Trump with 137. The red states for Trump, the blue for Clinton. The white states are what we are watching right now. Those are states where the polls have closed. But the vote is so close in those states, we cannot project who might be the winner. John Dickerson.
Well, if I'm a Clinton supporter and I'm looking at Virginia, this state that was once lean for Hillary Clinton and is now a toss-up, I'm paying a lot of attention to Fairfax County. As Nancy Cordes reported, 80% of the vote is in. Hillary Clinton is down overall just 10,000 votes. Fairfax County brings in, Barack Obama got 260,000 votes there. So
this is the suburbs of Washington, D.C.
Fairfax County is just outside of Washington, D.C., a very strong Democratic county. If I'm a Democrat who wants Hillary Clinton to be elected, I'm watching the votes come in Fairfax County, hoping that it performs as it did for Barack Obama, which would give her, or at least help close that 10,000 vote deficit in Virginia.
Can you put it in perspective, John, from 2012? Where were we in terms of calling states?
Well, in 2012, by now, the battleground states, although Michigan wasn't as much of a battleground as it is right now, was called by now, as was Pennsylvania. Again, not as much of a battleground as it is right now. At 10 o'clock, by 10 o'clock, North Carolina, which was very much of a battleground, tight, very tight, was called by 10 o'clock in 2012.
All right. Bottom line, to follow on your line, if you're a Clinton supporter, you're popping an anti-anxiety pill right now. Charlie Rose is over with the panel. Charlie?
Thank you, Nora. We're talking, remember, the first thing we said at 7 o'clock, it's a tight race. And we're seeing that in the states that are contested and very different. On the one hand, you got Virginia and North Carolina and Florida, and then the Rust Belt, and then you have a couple out west. Let's talk about the Rust Belt. Why are they so tight?
You know, it's interesting. I was in Ohio just a couple of weeks ago in Trump country, southeastern Ohio, eastern Ohio. There's this Scots-Irish spine that kind of runs up and down Appalachia, and one of the things that is pretty consistent along that spine is that they've seen less of an economic comeback in the wake of the recession. They have a lot more economic resentment. They also have cultural resentment towards a class of elites who they believe have ignored their needs, ignored their priorities for far too long. And I really detected when I was talking to voters there just an enormous amount of rebelliousness, a feeling that they needed to send a message to Washington and to the country. I think you're seeing that happen tonight.
Jamal?
Yeah, I want to talk a bit more about that cultural resentment, because I think we run the risk of sort of painting it a little too amorphous. But remember, Trump ran his campaign. He began his campaign attacking Hispanic immigrants and various other racial and ethnic minorities. And I think some of this cultural anger we should correctly identify as being racial animus, and that it's significant that Trump has closed so much of a gap and done so well with white voters across the country.
Racial because they believe as they gained in terms of voter strength and economic strength. Right. That they were losing.
Right. That's sort of zero-sum view of American life.
It is zero-sum, but I think that the other aspect of it is the message Trump was sending was, it's not your fault that things are this way. It's the fault of immigrants or bad trade deals or wasteful wars, etc. And that was a message that they responded to.
Correct. Well, I mean, Donald Trump has run, for a Republican especially, a very negative campaign. Not just so much negative as far as attacking his opponent, but also negative, very pessimistic. It's like America is really suffering. Make America great again. It's backward looking. So in a sense, I mean, that was directed perfectly to the states he needs in the rest of the night: Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania. And those are, I mean, he needs to break through certainly in either Michigan and Pennsylvania, and we'll see if that's going to carry him through. But it does seem like pessimism has helped him there.
Yeah. To his point, it's that power of nostalgia. Nostalgia for a time when the Rust Belt felt stronger, when there were more jobs, when there were stable situations. In Ohio, union voters went for Barack Obama in 2012, 60-37. Now it's 49-44, essentially even in terms of the exit poll data.
And I think a second big question here is, to what degree are college-educated white voters okay with Trump's campaign of nostalgia, of racial animus? I think the assumption has been that they wouldn't be okay with it, but perhaps in states like Florida and North Carolina especially, they may just be.
Good point. And it also seems like he is maybe overperforming, in very early numbers, granted, but it also seems like Hillary Clinton might be slightly underperforming, maybe among Hispanics as far as the volume of them going for her in Florida. I think Fairfax obviously is key in Virginia.
And the night is young, and in some of those cases we've only heard about 20 to 25% of the vote. Back to Nora.
All right, Charlie, thank you. That's right. 13 battleground states that we are watching very closely. 4 years ago, we had called 2 of them. We've yet to call any of them tonight. We're going to go state by state, go in depth and explain why this race is so close at this hour. You are watching CBS News election coverage. Well, this is getting awfully exciting, guys. North Carolina, a state which we had earlier given the edge to Hillary Clinton, we've now moved back up into the toss-up category.
Charlie Rose, those are your people.
They are
North Carolina.
And I'm not sure what's happening, John.
Well, we've got a little bit down in the African-American vote. 21% of the electorate there is African-American. It was 23% in 2012. That might be one answer. In Mecklenburg County, that's like Fairfax County in Virginia, only 43% of the vote. That is a deeply, that is Charlotte. That is a deeply blue area. If I'm Clinton's people and I'm focused on Fairfax, I'm also focused on Mecklenburg.
We've also got new information about what is happening in the state of Florida, why it's so close, record-breaking turnout, and we've got news of your local races. More as CBS News Election Night continues.
Of the United States. This race is close. We can't project a winner yet in a single one of them. Anthony Salvanto, our Director of Elections, let's have a look here at some of these states that are just too close to call. We just moved North Carolina into the toss-up category.
Right. It had been leaning Clinton for a while, but what's happening, Scott, is that we are seeing votes coming in now all here around the coast, counties where Donald Trump is, and this is a story we've been telling all night, overperforming what we thought he might do, overperforming in Republican areas. Hillary Clinton is down just a little bit in some of these blue counties. They represent places that are going Democratic, doing not well enough. But if Donald Trump can offset whatever margin she's going to make down here around Raleigh-Durham, then that's why we've got it at least back to toss-up right now.
Before we leave you, let's have a look at Florida.
Yeah, let me tell you what's going on. In Florida,
extremely close. Donald Trump has to win it.
He has, well, you know, he probably has to win it. But let me tell you what's happening here. We're seeing record turnout, as you mentioned. But what happens is when we look at these counties and we say how much of the vote is in, well, votes keep coming in because turnout is so high. So what happens is in our models, we're waiting to see 100% in, but that bar keeps getting higher and higher because more and more votes keep coming in. So in that case, we just have to wait and see what the final tally is going to be.
Anthony Salvanto, thank you very much.
Welcome.
Nora O'Donnell has the breakdown of each of these 13 states tonight.
That's right, Scott. Thank you so much. And let's just say what it is right now. It is a white knuckles kind of night. You're either opening a second bottle of wine or you're brewing a new pot of coffee because we've got a long way to go tonight. So let's go through all of these states, starting with Florida. Take a look at the Sunshine State. It is still a toss-up. We have more than 90% of the vote in. Donald Trump ahead by about 2 percentage points there. Just so you know, Anthony was telling us earlier that they're expecting a record turnout in this state. Let's look at Ohio. Also, just about 70% of the vote in. Donald Trump leading there. North Carolina, Donald Trump leading in that state. In the state of Virginia, you can see how close the margin is there. Clinton's team waiting for Fairfax, that Northern Virginia, to come in. Pennsylvania, another battleground state. Look at that. Another toss-up, 48 to 48. Let's take a look at the Keystone State of Pennsylvania. First, we'll go to Georgia. Bob, you were asking about Georgia. Donald Trump giving him the edge in the state of Georgia. Let's take a look at New Hampshire. Also a toss-up at this hour. And Michigan. Just about a quarter of the vote in there. CBS News estimating that as a toss-up. And Arizona, a state, of course, that has just closed 0-0 at this point. As part of the early vote, the Hispanic vote will be key there. Let's wait and see. And then Wisconsin. CBS News also calling that battleground a toss-up, I think, and Colorado, a toss-up at this hour. Remember, Colorado is a 100% mail-in vote. Be interesting to see how that particular state turns out. Let's just pull back for a second, John, since we've just gone through all of those boards, what it means.
Well, I'm just looking here in Florida, and to Anthony's point about turnout. I mean, in the big counties of Broward and Palm and Miami-Dade, you're seeing 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 more votes for Hillary Clinton, but also in Broward, 10,000 more votes for Donald Trump. In Palm Beach, which he's familiar with, 13,000 more votes for Donald Trump. So both sides are going up, and that's why it's so close.
Let's have a look at the Electoral College map quickly to show you where the race stands right now. Hillary Clinton, 104 electoral votes. Donald Trump, 140. 270 are needed to win. In other words, Donald Trump is well over halfway there. Some big Democratic counties, of course, like California, for example, the biggest of all. Still, we haven't heard from them because the polls haven't closed. But at this snapshot in time, Donald Trump more than halfway there. The red states we have estimated for Trump. The blue states we've estimated for Hillary Clinton. The white states are states where the polls have closed, but they're too close to call.
Well, Donald Trump said from the very beginning he was going to do it his way. He was going to run an unprecedented campaign. And clearly his message is resonating, depending on your point of view. Back to your point, Nora, you're doing the hula, or friends I know are calling on sweet black baby Jesus right about now. It really depends on where you stand in this election. And so far, people, he said he wanted to do it. He said he wanted to make a change, and people have liked the message that he is giving people tonight.
Yeah, Elaine Quijano, you're hearing from the Trump family, I understand. They're posting on social media.
Yes, yeah. Let's go ahead and show you that first. I want to return to the issue of Florida, but let's go ahead and take a look at what Donald Trump himself tweeted just a short time ago. This was at 9:45. He said, watching the returns at 9:45 p.m., hashtag election night, hashtag make America great again. And you can see in that picture there, of course, his family. You see his running mate there, Governor Mike Pence. But I want to go back to Florida for a moment, because we had talked at the outset of the millennial vote and the affinity for third-party candidates. Well, now we have a little bit of data, because you recall going into it, I said about 13% or so of millennials were saying that, you know, they would go for another candidate. Well, now in Florida, with 95% of the vote in, we know that those who chose Gary Johnson and Jill Stein combined for over 265,000 votes.
Wow.
And when you consider that Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton separated by just 134,177 votes, perhaps the third-party candidates are a factor.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, also happening in North Carolina, where the share of the vote for the younger voters of 18 to 29 is up to 19%. That's 3 points higher than in 2012. But here you have Gary Johnson getting 7% of that vote. Hillary Clinton only getting 58% of the vote, which is down from Barack Obama, got 67%. So
Gary Johnson being the libertarian candidate, the third-party candidate.
And on climate and change issues like that are very appealing to millennials.
Bob Schieffer, you had a point.
I was just listening to Nora run through these states here, and you know, we called these battleground states in the beginning, but we had picked out favorites. Like, for example, we thought Colorado was going to be a battleground state, but we thought that Hillary Clinton was probably, in fact, some of the Clinton people told me it was already theirs.
Yeah.
Last week they were talking about, it's now a toss-up. Pennsylvania. I think most people thought that was leaning toward Hillary Clinton. That was maybe the safest big battleground state for her. It's a toss-up. Georgia, we always thought that would go Republican, and it's going that way. But then Michigan, I think most people thought that was in the Democratic column, leaning that way, even though it was a battleground. So we are seeing things now, and it seems to be a trend here, where we see him leading in some places, or at least toss-ups where we didn't think that.
How do you explain it, Bob? How do you explain it, Bob?
Well, I don't know. I mean, most people seem to have voted for him than voted for her.
Remembering the exit vote that we saw, you know, we said it was going to be tight. That was one thing that we said. But is what we're seeing now different than what we expected from the exit polling that we had?
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. We just have some new numbers out of Virginia. Anthony Mason can share those with us that I think will shed some light on what is going on in the Dominion state. Anthony?
Yeah, Nora, we want to look at three potential trouble spots for the Democrats in Virginia. First is among white women with college degrees. This was a group that Hillary Clinton wanted to perform very well with, but as you can see, Donald Trump is running just about even with her among highly educated white women. The second group, young voters. Now, Clinton is winning young voters over, well, very strongly, 51 to 38%, but Barack Obama got 61% of young voters 4 years ago, so she's underperforming by 10 points here. And finally, voters in Virginia view Hillary Clinton almost as negatively as Donald Trump on the issue of honesty and trustworthiness, as you can see right there. So three problems, three areas of trouble for Clinton and the Democrats in Virginia, which is surprisingly a toss-up right now. Gail?
All right, Anthony, following up with what you're saying about Virginia, the independent voters there, 49% voted for Donald Trump, 41% voted for Hillary Clinton. Independents, it seems, can make a real difference here, John.
They can. I was just looking here at the, we were talking earlier about in Virginia, Fairfax County coming in now for Hillary Clinton, so that she was down 10,000 votes. She's now up by almost 17,000. So that's how, again, those Democrats looking for hope, they're finding it in there.
Let's check in on the state of Missouri, because CBS News projects that Donald Trump has won the state of Missouri. We'll be also watching the state of Missouri as there is a key Senate race there as well. Senator Roy Blunt facing a tough challenge in that state. We'll have an update on his race out of Missouri, but Donald Trump, the projected winner there.
Now with 150 electoral votes on his way to 270, those being the votes needed to win the presidency. Hillary Clinton still at 104.
And that was pretty much expected.
Missouri. Yes, Missouri. Very little of the rest of this has been expected, certainly in the 13 toss-up states.
Let's talk about, too, what's going on as the polls have closed in almost all of the battleground states. Well, in fact, they have closed in all of the battleground states. We've been here for a few hours, so I've lost track of time, but it is 10 o'clock and they've all closed.
Iowa's just closed.
Iowa's just closed. Nevada.
Well, two fascinating. Iowa is a state that Barack Obama carried twice. Is one of those states where it's got an older population even than Florida. It's got a highly blue-collar or non-college educated and a big white population. So that the Clinton people have thought Iowa gone. Nevada, very interesting, because before tonight, based on the early vote, the Clinton campaign and Democrats were basically saying that Nevada was really going to be in their column. That Donald Trump couldn't match on Election Day what they had been able to accumulate in the early vote. Well, that may be another thing that gets undone by what we're seeing tonight.
John Dickerson, thank you very much. We're going to take a brief break here. We are going to come back with all the very latest results from these key battleground states, and we're going to visit with some of our correspondents who are in those states for us. Election night continues here on CBS. Election night on CBS, we have an important update for you on Ohio. We have now moved Ohio into the likely Republican category. Anthony Salvanto, our Director of Elections, tell me about Ohio.
Well, Scott, it's not a projection yet, but let me show you why this is trending toward Donald Trump. We always talk about Cleveland and how Hillary Clinton had to get big turnout there. She's doing okay, but I would point you to these counties around Cleveland, places like Lake County. Democrats often do well in the suburbs around Cleveland, too. Hillary Clinton is not. Donald Trump is outperforming. Again, I've used that word 100 times tonight, but he's outperforming what Republicans typically do in these counties here along the lake. And if that holds, then he could very well take Ohio.
Tell us about the rest of the upper Midwest.
Yeah, it's so important, Scott. We talked coming into this night that if this would be what they called the blue wall, Hillary Clinton's base where these states reliably vote Democratic, but they're full of the kind of blue-collar workers and voters that usually go Democratic, but Donald Trump has been targeting them. And we haven't made projections yet in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Wisconsin. All of those are still in play, and as long as that holds, it tells you the story that Hillary Clinton is underperforming what she needs to do.
Anthony Salvanto, our Director of Elections, thank you very much. In the closing days of the election, Donald Trump spent extra time in Wisconsin and Michigan, and Nora, it looks like tonight that's paying off.
That's right. And as Anthony said it, Hillary Clinton underperforming in a number of these battleground states that she had expected to do well in. We've got reporting from inside these battleground states. Jan Crawford is in North Carolina. Jerika Duncan is in Pennsylvania. First, we'll go to Jan Crawford. Jan?
Well, remember, I mean, North Carolina is a state that typically goes Republican in presidential races. Back in 2008, of course, President Obama won this state, but by the narrowest of margins. And then in 2012, Mitt Romney won by 2 points. But still, this was one of those closely fought battleground states that the Clinton campaign thought they could possibly win. And they made a big push here. I mean, Hillary Clinton came here for her last stop of her campaign, that midnight rally last night, featuring Lady Gaga and John Bon Jovi, attracting thousands of people. And then, of course, today she continued to do radio interviews here in this state, trying to get her message out. But to win this state, she needed to carry the African-American vote, and there were troubling signs there. Now, early turnout, early voting, that was up across the board, the totals, about 12% since 2012. But the African-American early vote was down 9%. So we actually saw people, we drove around to a lot of the precincts today, and we actually saw people standing in line, African Americans at polling places, and there weren't that many lines, on the phone making calls saying, why aren't you voting? Come out and vote. People saying that they just weren't going to vote. That is key for her here. On the flip side, Trump needed to turn out those rural whites, people who may not have voted for Romney, they didn't particularly care for him, people who may not have come out in 2008. He needed to turn those out, and some of the early voting numbers suggested those voters came out as well. All over, of course, the battle for these 15 electoral votes that are up for grabs in this state.
All right, from North Carolina now to Pennsylvania, which is also in the toss-up category. Jerika Duncan is in Philadelphia. Jerika?
There was a lot of concern here about potential voter fraud, which is something that Donald Trump made an issue. So you had the district attorney putting extra resources into that voter fraud task force. But at the end of the day, there were no reports of any intimidation or voter fraud. As for voter turnout, I can tell you the nonpartisan watchdog group Committee of 70 was saying that turnout seemed to be higher than the last presidential election, but nothing official yet. A lot of folks that we spoke to, primarily in African-American communities, felt good. They said that just based on the lines that they had seen, the amount of people that were out early this morning, that they felt Hillary Clinton definitely had this state on lock. And we know that the last time a Republican actually took this state was in 1988. So you're talking about a state that is primarily Democratic, but of course it is up in the air. It is not over yet. So it remains to be seen just how all of those factors play into what actually happens tonight. We also want to note that the absentee ballots, that was actually down about 20%. So there will be a lot of questions asked, a lot of analyzing, but at the end of the day, it's not over just yet.
Jerika, thank you very much. We are making an adjustment in our estimate in Florida. We are moving Florida now to lean edge, I beg your pardon, not quite a lean, just an edge, but an edge to Donald Trump, the Republican. John, why are we making that change, and what does it mean?
Well, it means that Hillary Clinton may have turned out her vote, and a lot of Latinos are turning out, but Donald Trump is turning out his vote too. Again, in those rural areas, when you look at the map, all of that red, he's doing it a little bit in each place. Hillary Clinton is doing it in big places around the cities. One thing I think we can conclude basically here is at the beginning of the night there was a big question. Did Donald Trump's vision of the electorate, which was in contrast to many Republicans, which is that he could do well by appealing to the electorate on his terms, that's been ratified. He did well by appealing on his terms. He may or may not be president. But in terms of that theory of the case, he has done well enough tonight to prove that he was right about that.
I want to talk more about Florida, but very quickly, in the state of New Mexico, CBS News projects that Hillary Clinton has won in that state. New Mexico now goes for Hillary Clinton, and it's 5 electoral votes. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, more on the state of Florida, why it is edge Republican, what it now means for Donald Trump and for Hillary Clinton as they try to put together an electoral vote pathway to victory. We'll explain. We'll be right back.
Where?
We've got news to report, ladies and gentlemen. In Arizona, Senator John McCain has been declared the winner in that state. John McCain was seeking his 6th term in the United States Senate, 80 years old. Of course, the former Republican nominee for president has won a victory there.
He also made it clear he would not be voting for Donald Trump. I think the final straw for him was after that Access Hollywood tape. He said neither he or his wife would be voting for Donald Trump. And he had stood by him for several times.
And remember, of course, Donald Trump at one point said he liked people who weren't captured and made prisoner.
I do remember that.
Well, at this hour, we have a number of battleground states still yet to call. I think I said earlier, it's a white-knuckle race. We'll have more. Charlie Rose in the political panel. All that coming up. In the state of Virginia, CBS News projects Hillary Clinton has won the Old Dominion. This was a state that was lean edge, it was toss-up. Well, now we're projecting
it's been called.
Those electoral votes are now in Hillary Clinton's column. 13 electoral votes.
Why did it jump around so much? Because, and this will happen in other states over the night, and people should know about this, there are those places where the Democrats do well, those cities which have a lot of votes in them. And if it takes a while for those votes to get cast, Hillary Clinton can be behind and then come back. And so that's what happened in Fairfax County. The vote came in from Fairfax County, it went to Hillary Clinton. And that, again, suburb of Washington, D.C., and that appears to be what put her over the top.
And this is the very first of the battleground states that we have been able to estimate a winner in. Let's have a look at the battleground map now. Hillary Clinton goes up to 122 electoral votes to Donald Trump's 150. As you know, 270 needed to win the presidency. Still much too close to call in Florida. And CBS News is making a new projection for the state of Ohio. And we'll have that up for you here in just a moment. And there is the state of Ohio. CBS News is projecting that once all the votes are counted, Donald Trump will win Ohio. Now, this keeps his hopes alive. Ohio was a very important state for him to win. He needs to win Ohio. He needs to win Florida. Right now, Florida is too close to make an estimate, but Donald Trump is leading in the vote. There's the electoral vote count right now. Hillary Clinton 122, Donald Trump 168. John, what does Ohio mean?
Well, Ohio was one of those states. They're falling into the traditional patterns. Ohio was a state that Donald Trump was had a chance to do well in because there was a big portion of the electorate that was non-college educated voters. There's a low portion of the electorate that was minority. And so that was a state, if people were to put it on a list, Ohio would be one that might go in the Trump category. It did. Virginia, a more diverse electorate, also with a larger share of college educated voters, that has gone to Hillary Clinton. So those are ones that have sorted in a way that we would have expected before tonight, which is a change since so much has happened tonight that's been unexpected.
But it's also a state where Hillary Clinton pulled out all the stops in terms of star power that she brought to Ohio. I mean, it shows you that celebrity endorsement don't necessarily mean victory on Election Day, very clearly.
That's for sure, unless you're a celebrity yourself, in Donald Trump's case, and that seems to have helped him certainly in the state of Ohio.
Yes. This is going to be a very close election, because if Donald Trump goes on to win Florida, that will mean he has won 2 of the big battleground states. Hillary Clinton can still win if she wins Pennsylvania, but this one's going right down to the wire.
In fact, I spoke with a top Clinton campaign official when I asked about what's going on in the state of Florida, because they had boasted to me earlier in the night that they felt very strong because they had banked a lot of early votes. And at this hour, we have it edging Republican in Florida, edging, to be clear. This top Clinton official telling me it's very tight in Florida, but we can afford to lose it as long as we get Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, and Nevada.
And Michigan becomes even more important now.
Great point.
DeMarco Morgan is with Anthony Salvanto over at our decision desk, and to tell us a little bit about why we made these estimates, Trump for Ohio and Hillary Clinton in Virginia.
All right, Scott, let's go ahead and start with Ohio right now. Hillary Clinton was heavily counting on the African-American vote. Looks like it didn't work in her favor. How did Trump win and walk away with this state?
Because it wasn't enough, DeMarco, because I'm going to point you to a story of a couple of counties down here around Canton. Now, all through this campaign, we've been talking about those blue-collar voters that might go for Donald Trump, that might respond to his message. It's clear that they did, because there are counties here around Canton, Mahoning County, Stark County, where he has outperformed what Republicans typically do and actually exceeded what is typical, even in the best of times, for a Republican. Maybe they break even there, but he's up 56-40, he's up 53-42 in those places. That's a big reason he wins Ohio.
Now, before we move on to the other states, is it safe to call this a surprise tonight?
Well, he was up marginally in our polling coming into this, but he had to get this pattern in order to actually pull it off, and he did. So in that sense, our pre-election poll looks like it was pretty much right.
Okay, before we talk about Virginia, let's go to Florida. Still too close to call.
Yeah, Florida is an interesting case because we're still counting how many ballots there are, not just who is up. So as we've been saying all night, we've been looking through all these counties around Orlando, around Tampa, places that Republicans usually do well, but he's doing exceptionally well. And the last thing I'll point you to, DeMarco, I want to take you to Virginia, which we also projected for Hillary Clinton. And here she's gotten enough turnout around these D.C. suburbs, even though all the votes aren't counted there yet. That's her area, and so when all the votes come in, we can expect that she'd be able to carry the state. But this is much, much closer than the pre-election polling ever expected.
Are you surprised that we haven't called to North Carolina yet?
No, that one looked razor tight going in, and it still is.
Long night?
Maybe.
All right. Let's go to send it back to Scott and Nora.
All right, DeMarco, thank you so much. There's lots to talk about how the rest of this night will go. Charlie Rose is with the political panel. Charlie?
And I'm with three women, Peggy Noonan of the Wall Street Journal, Michelle Norris of the Aspen Institute, and Ruth Marcus of the Washington Post. We want to talk about women, and there is a number of divisions that we can speak to. One, college-educated versus not college-educated, young, old, African-American, white, and rural, urban. How is the women's vote influencing this election?
Well, look, we may be in the middle of witnessing an epic upset here, so we're just not sure what's going on, but Mr. Trump is performing better than he had seemed to in exit polls and in other polls. Part of that obviously would suggest that A, there actually was something of a hidden Trump vote, and B, some of them would have been women. So we'll figure that out as the days go by. That having been said, Mr. Trump would not be close now, but I think very much in the lead now if his attitude towards and language towards women, minorities, etc., had not been so alienating. Put a lot of them off. I'm sure it cut down on the number of people who were voting for him.
Almost saying if he hadn't done that with respect to women and Latinos, he would be much closer to being president.
Yes, actually. I actually once wrote a column called Saying Trump Would Win in a Landslide.
If he weren't Donald Trump.
Well, there's
a different candidate altogether.
There's two things that we know. If he weren't behaving as Donald Trump had behaved, he'd have a much better chance of being president. But also, if only men still had the right to vote, he would certainly be president, because we still see a really significant gender gap here. A couple really important points. Women are 53% of the electorate. This looks like this time around, same as they were 4 years ago. But Hillary Clinton is performing better against Donald Trump than Barack Obama did against Mitt Romney with women. I'm going to put on my I might put on my glasses for some of this. She is down 8 points against Trump. With men, she is up 14 points with women overall. With white men, she is down 30 points, okay? She's down with white women, but she's only down by about 8 points. That is less than that is better than Barack Obama's performance with white women versus Mitt Romney. So I think here's my point. If you're not a Donald Trump fan and he wins, blame the men. Don't blame the women.
But the story here might be rural women.
and rural women and
not
rural women who lack
college-educated.
college education.
Right.
I mean, when I was visiting Ohio not long ago, someone said that, you know, people focus on Hillary Clinton trying to break the glass ceiling, and that perhaps they should have looked at women who, the cracked windshield voters, the people who can't afford to fix the windshield, that can't afford to put food on the table, that can't afford to send their kids to college. And she may have had a harder time reaching out to those voters because those voters seem to be supporting Donald Trump and much larger.
That was in all the focus groups, what you just described, how they felt
And
about
there's
her.
also a
Not good.
question about those young women and how we still haven't seen precisely those numbers, whether they were as energized as, say, their mothers were.
Notwithstanding the
or
fact
they
that electing
migrated
a
from-
woman would be a
Indeed.
historic
And it would
thing.
be.
Is it fair to say that the three of you, when you came here this evening, did not believe that Donald Trump might win this election, and now you all three think it's possible?
Well, he had a very narrow path at the beginning of the evening, but it seems like that path is not as narrow as it was. I mean, I think, speaking of the room, I think all of us feel that that changed within the last hour.
Yeah, past hour and a half, we started to see, wait a second, expectations in the polls are not being borne out by the numbers we're seeing on the screen right now.
Thank you all.
Three
Back to the
not
desk.
nasty women.
Not nasty women. Not
We
nasty
should have been
women.
Nastier.
Back to Scott and Nora.
Fascinating discussion, really interesting.
One of the interesting things, Nora, is that since the nomination of the two candidates, Donald Trump has never led in the CBS News poll, never been ahead since he and Hillary Clinton were nominated, and yet tonight he's keeping up quite well.
Well, if there was a time to get ahead, this is it.
Well,
this is the time to pull ahead, y'all.
it's all pretty academic today. That's true.
Let's roll out the old cliche, the only poll that matters is the one on election.
Yes, that's right.
Finishing strong indeed. We have a lot of data still ahead to share with you, including the Hispanic vote and what is happening in the West. We're also getting closer to a call in Florida. Before we get to Florida, let's go to Anthony Mason on that Hispanic vote. Anthony?
Yeah, as we said early in the evening, Nora, the Hispanic vote makes up about 12% of eligible voters, but in three key battleground states in the Southwest, Nevada, Colorado, Arizona, it's higher than that. Let's see how much higher today. As you can see, coming in Arizona, it's about 16% right now, Colorado 13%, Nevada 18%. Interestingly, this is actually a little bit lower than 4 years ago. Let's look at Nevada, where Hillary Clinton has a significant advantage among Hispanic voters, 59% to 27%. But let's go back 4 years and see what Barack Obama did. He won Hispanics with 71% of the vote. So she's significantly underperforming Obama among Hispanics in Nevada. That's discouraging for the Democrats. Gail?
All right. Thank you very much, Anthony. You know, to follow up, Charlie, on your panel with the women who made it very clear they are not nasty women. We're now thinking about pathways to victory. What does that look like? In the beginning of this evening, Nora, Kellyanne Conway said she had 6 different pathways to victory. What are the pathways to victory we could focus on?
Those pathways still remain somewhat the same. The Clinton campaign believes that if they were to lose the state of Florida, that they could still win with Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, and Nevada. In fact, a lot of their models did not include Ohio.
There's the question, there are two questions. One is how are they going to split up the battleground states? That's one. The other is, can Donald Trump pierce the so-called blue wall, those traditionally Democratic states? Michigan is one of them. Wisconsin is another one. And Pennsylvania is a third. And so does Hillary Clinton hold on to those? The limited number of pathways that Donald Trump had was based on the idea that a number of states would follow their historical pattern.
John, I'm sorry to interrupt, but CBS News is projecting that when all of the votes are counted, Hillary Clinton will have won the state of Colorado, one of the toss-up states that we have been watching very closely tonight. CBS News now believes that Hillary Clinton will be the winner in Colorado. That gives her Colorado and Virginia. Donald Trump, we have projected the winner in Ohio.
This was the state, Bob, that we talked about earlier, Colorado, where the Clinton campaign believed, because it is 100% mail-in vote, that organization, that ground game would put them over the top.
Yeah, this was one of those battlegrounds that, you know, in the beginning we called it a battleground, but most of the polling suggested in the beginning that she was going to win Colorado. This is very important now with Florida still out there with Ohio still out there, this was a very important win for her.
Let me do a what if. I mean, can we go to the fact that if, in fact, Donald Trump wins Florida, wins Pennsylvania, and wins Michigan, is he much closer to the nominee?
Yeah, because he's won Ohio, but those
He still has to win North Carolina.
Not if he wins Michigan and Wisconsin, that changes the original map.
Or Michigan and Pennsylvania.
The thing about Colorado that's important and interesting here is that it is connected to Virginia in the minds of a lot of Democrats.
Right. Let's have a quick look at the tally where we stand right now. Hillary Clinton 131, Donald Trump 168, on the way to 270 electoral votes needed to win. We'll be back in a moment with this very tight race. It's election night on CBS. Welcome back to Election Night on CBS, and what an election this is. It's already having ramifications for the American economy. Have a look at this. The Dow futures are now off 632 points. That's about 3.5%. Investors are reacting to this. This is the election as it stands right now. Let's have a look at the electoral vote. Hillary Clinton 131, Donald Trump 168, 270 needed to win. Now look at this. This is the popular vote. These are the raw total of numbers of people who have voted. And as you can see, Donald Trump is ahead of Hillary Clinton by a little bit over 2 million votes.
Investors don't like the uncertainty of what we're looking at right now?
Investors hate uncertainty, and if this night is anything, it is uncertain.
Unless you're in the team Donald Trump, they're feeling that they're looking at us thinking, this is what we predicted all along,
I think that they're probably looking at this, if the rise of Donald Trump, the fact that he's made this so close, they believe he brings more uncertainty because he's less familiar to them in terms of a leader.
And he's also called out the Wall Street corporate interests that are in control of Washington, and he represents more uncertainty if he were to be president by design.
Oh, to be a fly on the wall at Trump Tower or at the hotel where Hillary Clinton and her team are tonight to find out what they are thinking at this hour. Nancy Cordes has been talking to her sources inside the Clinton campaign. Nancy, what have you learned?
Well, Nora, if you ask the Clinton campaign now or even any time in the past few months what their most likely path is to 270, they would always say we have multiple paths, but the most likely one is this. These 5 states, Virginia, Colorado, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Nevada. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, they probably wouldn't have even included Michigan on that list because they considered it a foregone conclusion. They still think they'll win, but it's going to be a lot closer. So far, they've been projected to win by CBS News 2 of the 5, and so they are watching those other 3 increasingly because now Florida and Ohio have been taken off the table. It's one of their only paths to 270. Are they confident? Yes. They feel that Virginia and Colorado were always so strong for them that they actually stopped airing ads in those 2 states for about 4 months. Michigan was a little wobbly towards the end, but Hillary Clinton went back there twice. The president went there as well. They're feeling pretty good about their path, but it's certainly not the cakewalk that they hoped it would be.
Nancy Cordes, thank you. Major Garrett has been covering the Trump campaign. Major, they've got to be feeling good inside the Republican nominees' campaign headquarters.
They're feeling much, much better. They now see 1 or 2, maybe 3 paths to 270 electoral votes, Nora. The Florida director for the Trump campaign, Susan Wiles, has told them, count on Florida. We're going to win Florida. I was just texting with Paul Manafort, former campaign manager for Donald Trump, still attached to this campaign, though not officially. He believes Trump is going to win North Carolina. I was just texting with the former Pennsylvania governor, Republican Tom Corbett. He is not a Trump person at all, but he's looking at Pennsylvania. He says because Trump is winning in Erie County and Luzerne County and running just a little bit behind Hillary Clinton in Lackawanna County, he said he believes Trump will win Pennsylvania. Another top Trump official I talked to is working with their field staff in Pennsylvania. They feel very encouraged about that. In the end, this may come down to Michigan, Nevada, New Hampshire, and the states I just mentioned. Nora and Scott?
All right, Major Garrett, thank you. Pennsylvania at this hour, still a toss-up. When we come back, we'll talk more about the battle for the battlegrounds, plus poll closings in the West Coast, including the biggest electoral prize of them all, the state of California.
I will be your voice, and I am going to fight so hard.
It's about fighting for a future where everyone counts.
It's election night on CBS, and we have breaking news. Polls are now closed in every state but Alaska. CBS News projects Hillary Clinton has won California and 55 Golden State electors. Donald Trump gets Idaho's 4 electoral votes. And with that, Clinton retakes the lead from Donald Trump in the race to 270 electoral votes. She has 186, he has 172. But 10 of the 13 battleground states still have no winner.
It's an incredible night. We're going to go now to the battlegrounds. Let's take a look at Florida, because we've made a change in the Sunshine State. 99% of the vote in the state of Florida, and CBS News now estimates this as likely Republican. John.
Donald Trump needed to win Florida, Ohio. He has won Ohio. If Florida goes his way, that's his straightest path. He's picking up the states for that straight path, and we still have the big question marks of those Rust Belt states, Wisconsin, Michigan, and of course Pennsylvania.
We should just point out that the electoral vote number just jumped to 190 for Hillary Clinton, because we've just called Hawaii, the state of Hawaii, the Aloha State, yes, for Hillary Clinton, a reliably Democratic state there. But let's talk about Florida for a moment, and then some of these additional battleground states. I think if you'd been watching CBS This Morning or the CBS Evening News or Face the Nation, you would have heard the Clinton campaign saying that they felt very good about that state because they had turned up the Hispanic vote. They even said that their modeling showed that they'd found a large portion of that new vote was Hispanics, over 900,000 Hispanics that had voted early.
And didn't they feel they had banked some votes, to your point?
They had told us that they had banked those votes, particularly in the Miami-Dade area, and that would offset any large turnout by Donald Trump on Election Day. So, John, does that mean that Trump supporters came out in droves today?
They did. And also, if the Clinton coalition is minorities plus women, white women with a college education, she didn't get that vote in Florida. That was not available to her because of the way the Florida electorate is shaped. So she was not able to, she did turn out the Latino vote, but not as much as Donald Trump turned out his vote.
You know what, John, so much during this campaign, we kept hearing that both candidates are very unpopular. They both have high negatives, that on Election Day would be people voting against someone as opposed to voting for someone. When you look at the results that are in so far, does that tell you anything?
Well, it could be
about
both.
That theory?
Mm-hmm. It might be both. I mean, it might be both voting against and for, with both groups being motivated to turn out. I mean, what we aren't seeing is what I was running into a lot with voters who were just saying, I just don't want to, I don't want either of them, and then we thought they might stay home.
Let's bring you up to date on the electoral map just quickly, because Hillary Clinton, for the first time tonight, has jumped into the lead with that big haul that we were expecting, of course, in California. She has now vaulted ahead in the Electoral College vote. 270 needed to win. She has 190 now.
We were talking about Donald Trump's pathway to victory. That includes a win in Florida. It is now likely Republican. A win in Ohio also would include a win in North Carolina. Let's look now at where we stand in North Carolina. CBS News is estimating that the state of North Carolina is leaning Republican. Now, this has been a Republican state. It has enjoyed battleground status recently because Barack Obama was able to put it in the Democratic column in 2008. He lost it to Mitt Romney in 2012. But this is leaning Republican.
Republican. We also just this will make you even more nervous if you're a Democrat. Is that Wisconsin has just moved? Sorry, it moved and then moved back. Never mind.
How about another state nearby, Michigan?
Still a toss-up.
How about Michigan, which is a toss-up?
Those are all still toss-ups. There was a brief moment there where Wisconsin moved, but it's back in. It's back, but it's fibrillating. Back to your point about North Carolina. You know, Donald Trump needed to win. That's one of the states he needed to win, and it looks like it's.
In addition, we talked about picking off.
We are just now making a projection for North Carolina. CBS News is estimating that Donald Trump will be the winner in North Carolina. This is a critical breakthrough for the Trump campaign. John Dickerson?
Yeah, I mean, it's that when we talked about the fact that the Republican is behind based on the traditional states that go Republican and Democrat, he needed to win a bunch of these battleground states, and now he's doing it.
But Charlie, you know the state so well. I'd love to hear what you're thinking right now.
Well, you've got to remember that for a long time, North Carolina was conservative because of Jesse Helms, and that he represented North Carolina's politics. North Carolina has a governor who is Republican. That was always there. There was the African-American vote that Obama got to come for him in 2008, and we thought that with the president there, it might make a difference this time and get the level of the African-American vote. He may still have. Hillary Clinton may have that level of African-American vote, but those people in eastern North Carolina who are conservative are obviously coming out in strong numbers.
We can now say, we keep talking about paths to victory. I think it's fair to say now that Donald Trump has a realistic path to victory at this point in the night. We're seeing all these divides tonight. Men versus women having different attitudes. And another divide we're seeing over and over tonight, rural versus city.
Yeah, well,
as well as educated and less educated.
And that's in North Carolina, too. That's what eastern North Carolina is rural.
He's gone from long shot to real shot.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he may, in fact, have more paths now to get to 270 than she does. I mean, we have to see how Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Michigan turn out. But if depending, and we also have to obviously wait to see the way things go in Florida. But if they continue to trend his way in Florida, that will, along with Ohio and North Carolina.
And John, you know as I do, because we've talked to both sides thought if he was going to win one of these big battleground states, probably his best bet was Iowa. And we still haven't called that yet. So.
Nancy Cordes.
Go to Nancy Cordes now, who is at Clinton headquarters. Nancy?
Well, Nora, the fact that North Carolina and Ohio now appear to have ended up in the Trump camp is a bitter disappointment for the Clinton campaign. They literally spent tens of millions more dollars in those states than Donald Trump did. They have been airing ads in the states for months. Hillary Clinton went back to North Carolina one last time at midnight last night. It was her final rally. Her running mate, Tim Kaine, spent the entire day in the state yesterday, so that just shows you how winnable they thought that state was. As for Ohio, she was in Cleveland twice in the past couple of days. She did that big concert with Beyonce and Jay-Z. Then she went back just to get a coronation from King LeBron James, which shows you the kind of impact that they thought those visits could have. Now, they would never have said that they thought that they had a fantastic shot in either of those states. Ohio, they always knew was a reach because of the demographics, but North Carolina, they really thought that they had a shot, and they had a huge ground game there, working especially to turn out African Americans in the state, but it appears it wasn't enough.
All right, Nancy Cordes, thank you. We just want to quickly point out that Wisconsin, the defibrillation continues. Is that what we called it?
Well, it was a fibrillation, and now it's fibrillated into the edge Republican.
Meaning some Democrats may need a defibrillator.
Yes, right. So the reason, of course, that's so important is that is a part of something that was a part of the firewall that the Clinton campaign was supposed to have in those Midwestern states that traditionally go to the Democrats, which means now Donald Trump is putting pressure on Hillary Clinton in Pennsylvania and now in Michigan and Wisconsin.
Wisconsin is the home state of the chairman of the Republican National Committee, Reince Priebus. Major Garrett is at Trump headquarters, has been talking to those inside the RNC. Major, what have you learned?
So what I've been told via Paul Manafort, remember, Donald Trump's second campaign manager, someone who is still close to the campaign and who is talking to all significant Republicans around the country, he has texted me just a moment ago that Reince Priebus, the Republican National Committee chairman and a Wisconsin Republican of long standing, has told Manafort that he expects Donald Trump will carry the state of Wisconsin.
Okay.
And Iowa Governor Terry Branstad has told Manafort he expects Trump would carry Iowa as well, and they're very encouraged about what they're seeing in Michigan. So in this upper Midwest aspect of the Trump campaign, they are seeing exactly what they hope to see, and they believe they are now, for the first time, seeing a solid path to victory, paved in part by the industrial Midwest.
Major Garrett, thank you very much. John Dickerson, help the audience with the map and the path moving forward. First, how does Hillary Clinton theoretically put a victory together?
Well, she has to hold Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania, all states where Donald Trump is putting a lot of pressure on her right now, and where he's doing very well in all three of those states. She has to hold all of them. And so that's basically the biggest challenge for her.
And what path to victory would Donald Trump have?
Well, he has to start picking off one of those states. If he got Wisconsin, that would put him, if he took Wisconsin and she held Michigan and then held Pennsylvania, that would get it at a, and then New Hampshire comes very much into play. Yeah. And then you start talking about the Maine, the 2nd District of Maine, which has 1 electoral vote, and in Nebraska, 2. We start to get down in 1s and 2s in terms of getting to that magic number.
And you know,
then there's Florida.
Let's not forget something else. Georgia has not yet been called. Our presumption was from the beginning that it was going to go Republican. They haven't called it yet.
And I don't want to raise this, but I will. There is a possibility of a tie. This could be tied. There are ways that this could tie, but not many.
And if they tied, you mean without anybody reaching 270?
Yes, 269 to 269.
And then it goes to the House.
Then it goes to the House of Representatives, where each state delegation has 1 vote. One would presume they would vote for the Republican, but I think tonight we've learned not to presume.
That's right. Yeah, but I mean, we haven't called New Hampshire yet. You know, it could come down conceivably to New Hampshire. I would also point out we haven't called Maine yet, Nora, where they split their electoral votes. They have 4, and it could be 3 to 1 or 2 to 2.
Right.
Or
for those that are calling their therapists right now, the night is still young. Stay tuned, because there are still a number of white states still on the map that we have not called or predicted.
Well, it's young on the West Coast. It's very late here.
It's young for us. I know. You're absolutely right. The Clinton campaign still believes that they could win with Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, and Nevada. We should talk about those states. We'll see. Arizona is one that they had hoped would be in their back pocket. Long shot of a state to think about Arizona, especially the way this night is
going. They were
going.
probably thinking about.
Since we just did Donald Trump's pathways, I just wanted to be fair and give Hillary's pathways as well.
But she has to hold Wisconsin and Michigan under that scenario, which is not at all certain at all that she's going to hold those 2 states. Hold them, by which I mean keep them in the Democratic column, because they have traditionally voted for the Democrats.
All of this may explain why they ended their campaign last night in Philadelphia.
what if the Independent wins out in Utah? Just to further scramble the situation here.
We've got Wisconsin up on the screen right now. We have estimated that Donald Trump has an edge right there. Now, there's about 64% of the vote in, and he is ahead by about 50,000 votes out of nearly 2 million that have been cast. So very close there. That's Wisconsin. Let's have a look now again at Florida. Florida is a shoe that has not dropped yet, but we have estimated it is likely to go Donald Trump's way. There is nearly 100% of the vote in, and it is 9 million votes roughly together, and Donald Trump is ahead by just a little over 100,000 out of 9 million.
When Donald Trump was in Wisconsin recently, I remember watching TV and him telling voters, listen, if you've already early voted and you wanted to change your vote, please feel free to do so.
Yeah, there's no indication that that many people did that, but what they did learn in Wisconsin, your point, is that they were able to, they had something like the airport hangar held something like 4,500 people, around that number. They said that they had tens of thousands of people that RSVP'd that couldn't get in. They clearly tapped into something in Wisconsin. Many people had doubted the Trump strategy of going to Wisconsin and Michigan at the last minute. They said, doesn't make any sense, but they saw something there.
And especially since he wasn't warmly welcomed by Paul Ryan. What role does he play?
What are the numbers as we look now at Pennsylvania?
Pennsylvania, Charlie, we still show as a toss-up state. We show Hillary Clinton ahead there by 100,000 votes. There have been more than 4 million cast. She is ahead by 100,000 votes. 81% of the vote has been counted so far, so still a toss-up there. Another toss-up, as Nora was noting, is Michigan. This is a state that Hillary Clinton's campaign fully expected that they would carry. And with 55% of the vote in, Donald Trump is ahead by about 58,000 votes out of 2.5 million that have been cast. So this is coming down to very small numbers between the two candidates.
One of the interesting themes that we talked about early on in this night that would give us some clues about how this election was going are the suburban women, white college-educated women. And you see in the states that Donald Trump is doing well, such as Florida. He won white college-educated women. And that has helped fuel, that coalition has fueled him doing so well in the state of Florida. It has broken in different places in different degrees.
Those are the 13 battleground states that you're looking at on the screen now. Blue for Hillary Clinton, red for Donald Trump. And as you can see, of the battleground states, there are only 4 of them that we have been able to estimate because the race is so tight in all of the others. The polls are now closed in all of the 50 states, save one, and that is Alaska, which will be closing very late tonight.
So I think we're going to be here very late tonight.
We may be waiting for Alaska. In the popular, the popular vote, as everyone knows, doesn't count for anything. It is the electoral vote that counts, but it is interesting to note that Donald Trump, at this point in the popular vote, is ahead by more than 2 million votes. He has 49% of the popular vote to Hillary Clinton's 46%.
Let's take a look at the state of New Hampshire. New Hampshire had Al Gore won New Hampshire, he would have won the presidency. New Hampshire is a small number of electoral votes, but could be critical tonight. Look at this. We're calling this a toss-up state. 47 to 47%. There is just 67%, 60-something% of the vote in there.
Interrupt because CBS News is estimating that in the state of Utah, Donald Trump is the winner. In the state of Oregon, we are predicting that Hillary Clinton will be the victor at the end of the night. So we should go back to our electoral vote board and show you where things stand right now. Wow. Hillary Clinton with 197 electoral votes, Donald Trump with 193. 270 needed to win, and now it is coming down, of course, to these battleground states like Florida, as Nora was saying, New Hampshire, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and just too close to call on those states right now.
All right, Major Garrett has been talking with his sources inside the Trump campaign about what they believe at this hour is their pathway to victory. Major?
Well, we haven't projected Florida, but the Trump campaign counts Florida. They're also beginning to count Pennsylvania, though it hasn't been called. They are extremely encouraged about Wisconsin, primarily because, as I reported just a few moments ago, the Republican National Chairman, Reince Priebus, has let them know he thinks Wisconsin will be won by Donald Trump. I've talked to Republicans in Michigan. They say it's very, very close. They give a slight edge to Donald Trump. You put Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania together, ladies and gentlemen, that's the path. That's the path that Donald Trump has always imagined might be possible, an anchor in the industrial Midwest with a conversation with the country for the first time in a very long time, challenging the underlying economic assumptions.